Okay, please be seated. Honorable members, as we normally do, we wish to remind you to please stay in your allocated seat and let's keep the distance and try and keep your masks on. And I would like to repeat the reason I don't seated where I am. It's because there are people who do interpretation, who want to read our lips when they do that from this point of view. And so we thought we should explain that. I do notice that out of our respect and consideration for others, even when we speak in public elsewhere, let's remember that the mask, when you speak, muffles your voice. Those who are sitting together wanting to hear you, don't hear you properly, can't read your lips. So let's make it our responsibility to raise awareness of that. I'm saying so because of what I saw during the past couple of days of people speaking with them. It's very difficult. Honorable Mazzoni, you've had a good weekend, clearly. The first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. The Chief Whip.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Deputy Speaker in the House, I move that this House designate Mrs. Honorable Noluthando Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula, the Speaker of the National Assembly, to replace Honorable T.R. Thandi Ruth Mudise as a member of the Judicial Service Commission. I so move, Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections. Agreed to. The next item on the order paper is member statements. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement?
Yes, Deputy Speaker, on the visual.
Yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The ANC welcome the new seawater desalination plant, which aims to deal with the crippling water crisis brought on by protected periods in droughts in Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape. The new plant, which is fitted with the state-of-the-art engineering technology to treat and process seawater so that it is suitable for human consumption, is a viable solution to the water challenges. After the water is processed in the plant, it is pumped to the municipal reservoir, which in turn takes care of the reticulation. This is the third project of this kind undertaken by the Quality Filtration Systems Company, following similar ventures in Beaufort West, in the Western Cape, and Balito in KwaZulu-Natal. It produces 2 million liters of water a day, while the wastewater plant produces 3 million liters. The salt is removed the seawater through reverse osmosis, and the water products goes to the final water tank and gets pumped to the municipal reservoir, which is about 2.5 kilometers from the place. The ANC is committed in bringing permanent water solution to the affected municipalities. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. DA?
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. At the Johannesburg burial of MK veteran Kevin Mapatswe on Sunday, numbers of mourners fired shots in the air. 236 cartridges have been found so far, AK-47, R5 and 9mm. Senior police officers present at the funeral did nothing. Police also did nothing when the Eupheus Old Age Home in Westdean phoned Sophiatown Police Station to say one of their 76-year-old residents had been hit in the leg by a bullet. Only the next day, when they realized the story was out, did police take an interest. 2 other houses in Westdean were hit by bullets. In Montgomery Park, a bullet smashed through a bedroom window, narrowly missing an 87-year-old man. Another bullet went through a car window. Shots have been fired at gangster funerals at West Park for years. The police say they can do nothing. It seems they have no manpower, organisation, care or courage to do their job. So must the residents around West Park hide in their cupboards or under their beds every time it's the burial of a gang leader or an ANC leader? I'm not hopeful the police will be held accountable for this dereliction of duty. This government's idea of consequence management is to manage to escape all consequences for their actions. I join the residents of my constituency in their outrage and disgust at this behaviour by the ANC and at this pathetic banana republic excuse for policing.
EFF.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In March 2020, the South African government declared COVID-19 a national disaster in terms of the Disaster Management Act, number 57 of 2002. This act introduced overnight regulations that prescribed activities were essential services to society. This national level intervention, ironically but tragically, exposed the underbelly of the post-apartheid state. The lockdown regulations set in motion a series of administrative reactions that have revealed more starkly the deep-seated and stubborn inequalities in South Africa. Contemporary forms of exclusion through neoliberal capitalism and the persistence of racism are entangled with the distinctive racist and oppressive practices of the apartheid past. South Africa's subsistence fishers from our coastal villages, from Port Nolloth in the Northern Cape to Saldanha Bay in the Western Cape to Tsitsikamma in the Eastern Cape, as far as Saldanha Bay in KZN and surrounding districts, found themselves caught in the net of regulatory distortions because of feigned attempts to redress past discrimination and exclusions in fisheries policy post-1994. The marginalization and the exclusion of subsistence fishers continue in the sector. The basic tenets of the Constitution was to do away with all economic and social disadvantages such as poverty, inequality, and lack of access to basic human rights. These values underpin the objectives of the Constitution. Equality and human dignity are foundational values that inform the interpretation of the Constitution, and these fundamental rights are the main tenets of the Bill of Rights. Long before greedy colonizers arrived at our shores, subsistence fishers had a symbiotic relationship with the environment, including the ocean. There was
Honorable,
never...
your time has expired. 20 seconds almost. No, that's not a... Please
No,
keep...
I just started.
No. Don't protest. Go home and do it better there. With yourself. IFP.
Very rude person.
Deputy Speaker,
Thank
stop
you,
this.
Deputy Speaker.
Why you always want to behave like a child? Stop making remarks like that, Deputy Speaker.
Can you please mute? And you are breaking the rules of the House. You will be thrown out, I promise you. There is no question about you speaking whenever you want to, as if there are no rules here. IFP?
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The IFP has noted that South African Police Service has never really enjoyed the best reputation pre or post-democracy. It was further tarnished in the few first weeks of the country's COVID-19 lockdown, as videos depicting abuses went viral. Over the years, the attitude of the community towards the police has increasingly diminished. The levels of trust and cooperation have dwindled. Corruption within the police and involvement with criminal elements, as well as poor service delivery, have all contributed to this. The Constitution, statutory law, common law, and the SAPS Code of Conduct and disciplinary regulations all include norms aimed at preventing and addressing police misconduct. The police minister published the crime statistics for Q1 in 2021 for 2022, with a significant increase in cases reported across several crimes categories. The 66.2% increase in murders is a great cause for the grave concern. Further, the rate at which police officers have been dying in the line of duty needs to be addressed with agency. We cannot continue to function successfully as a nation if our police remain targets of criminals. I thank you.
Thank you, FF Plus.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. In the Free State, water is not a basic human right. It is not even the rule in most towns. It is the exception to the rule. And sewage, not that, however, that is not the exception, but the rule. Honourable Minister, you may be the new incumbent in the Ministry of Water and Sanitation, but the fact of the matter is your predecessor, your department, and your party have failed the people of the Free State. In Gauteng local municipality, Parys, Skonkongville, and Tumahole have been without water for weeks, some parts as long as 61 days today. What does it help the department brags about the upgraded Trident water treatment plant, but there are no working pipes for the water to feed through? And the JoJo tanks being used for water are not the green tanks for water, but the yellow tanks for sewage. Kroonstad in Mukaka local municipality has such a huge sewage problem that besides for the smell, you will be forgiven for mistaking sewage for the false river. Certain residents cannot even enter their homes without wearing gumboots. In Machabeng, sewage has become so bad that the standing sewage has developed its own ecosystem with plants, ducks paddling, the works. And in Wetsdorp and Moroyaneng in Mangaung has become so used to only having water for 2 hours once a week that when they have water, they phone to find out why. If every household in those two towns flush their toilet once, the newly built reservoir is empty and needs to be refilled, meaning no water. Honourable Minister, this is not how people are supposed to be living, not in a pandemic, not ever. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Honourable members, don't give yourselves time you don't have. You have no authority to do that. DA?
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. The DA strongly supports the suggestion by the DTRC's lead negotiator on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, Dr. Morgan Pillay, that plans to reduce imports by 20% under the auspices of Minister Ibrahim Patel's policy of localization must be withdrawn. What is clear from her public statement is the fact that Minister Patel does not make evidence-based policy decisions, but rather he adheres strictly to his own ideological dogma. This dogma dictates that the state should control as much of the economy that it can get its hands on, regardless of the dire economic consequences it entails. Therefore, I ask the House to take note of the following: that both the commentariat and opposition politicians have warned against the dire economic consequences that such a policy entails, that the minister's drive towards import substitution may well lead to an increase in price and decrease in the quality of goods and services available to the South African public, and that Mao Zedong's China, Kim Jong-il's North Korea, and Stalin's USSR experienced not only macroeconomic destruction, but widespread hunger and famine as a result of pursuing such policies. The DA will continue to fight against policies that seek to centralize economic activity within the locus of the state and plunge people into poverty. South Africa needs more market and less state in order to achieve economic prosperity. I thank you.
Thank you. The ANC, I'm sorry I skipped you earlier on. ANC.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. On virtual platform. And that Diokaran, senior finance official in the Gauteng Department of Health, on Monday, the 23rd August 2021. She had just returned from dropping her child at school when a gunman ambushed and shot her multiple times. Her killing is suspected to be linked to her role in the probe into dodgy 332 million rands.
Again, I mosha technology. Msana blame umuntu ngento engekho. Siyasho ukuthi Kathleen, wait a minute. Honorable Hadeb, you keep rising and standing. What's your story in that day? Pulmana we beg.
No, Chairperson, I'm the duty whip here. Can I take over from my colleague?
No, but you should ask. You did not. You have not been doing so. When she became clearer, you chose to retreat. you were operating sensibly, but I request that finish that and let's do it. And keep coming back and up, please, man. Just do it. Yeah.
Thank you, TS. We are saddened.
And let's explain. Because of the breakdown in technology, that's the only reason we are allowing this to happen. Please, no one else must take chance. Go ahead, Ngat.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. We are saddened and angered at the senseless killing of Ms. Babita Jokaran, a senior finance official in the Gauteng Department of Health, on Monday, 23rd August 2021. She had just returned from dropping her children at school when gunmen and shot her multiple times. Her killing is suspected to be linked to her role in the probe into a dodgy 332 million personal protective equipment contracts in the province, where she was reportedly a key witness. We are encouraged by the swift action of the Hawks, who have arrested 8 men in connection with her death. A combined heavily armed team of 20 members of SAPS Tactical Response Team, National Intervention Unit, Johannesburg East Crime Intelligence, SAPS Johannesburg Canine Unit, SAPS Gauteng Serious and Violent Crime Unit, Special Task Force alongside private security companies such as Fidelity Quad, Special Services and Community Active Projects surrounded the area and arrested the suspects. Ms. Jokaran was a woman of principle and fought fearlessly against fraud and corruption. Her death should not be in vain. We send our heartfelt condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. ACDP. ACDP. Okay, Rabatula. ANC.
Sorry, Deputy Speaker, Steve Swart here. My colleague is muted. Can someone unmute her?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
The ACDP note that South Africa has been at the forefront with combating HIV/AIDS through a holistic focus on prevention and disease management for those living with HIV/AIDS. We have a model of home-based care treatment and positive messaging to eradicate stigma in communities and combating fear of those infected with HIV. These strategies have proven successful in improving the health outcomes for those living with the virus. Why is this holistic focus not implemented in the fight against COVID-19? Where is the focus on optimal treatment and early medical intervention to prevent escalation of disease? The ACDP puts it on record again that government is failing in implementing comprehensive communication strategies to combat COVID, which include early treatment to improve health outcomes for those battling COVID-19. In my constituency here in the Western Cape, the failure of early intervention is clear in the fact that most deaths occurred where medical intervention was sought after 10 or more days of illness. We are in a prolonged third wave with this disease fast being considered as endemic. We need to do a course correction on how we communicate on COVID-19 that does not only focus on prevention, but includes intervention measures to improve care at a community and primary care level. Thank you.
Thank you, ANC. NFP.
No, I'm here. Deputy Speaker.
Go ahead, Daddy.
No, Angtulang. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The City of Cape Town's negligence should be blamed for the death of the 2-year-old Imtande Swarboy who drowned after falling into an open sewer drain outside his family home in Greenpoint, Khayelitsha on the 29th of August. As an MP deployed in Khayelitsha, this is not the first time the child has fallen into a drain, but Imtandile had been the first one to die as a result of city's negligence in failing to fix broken, blocked, and overflowing drain in poor working class community. The child was discovered by his mother, Busisiwe Swarboy, who had been looking for him around the house. The drain was right outside the family's home and had been left open for weeks by the city officials, while the residents have repeatedly asking the municipality truck operating in around the area to fix the drain. The city had ignored their request. Only after I have spoken to the MECO member of Water and Sanitation and alerted her of the incident did they dispatch their trucks to fix the drain. The ANC conveyed condolences to the parents of Imtandile and the people of Khayelitsha for this tragic passing of her child. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, the 79-year-old grandmother of Imtandile was also overwhelmed by the sad news and unfortunately later passed on in hospital. The pertinent question that we should ask ourselves, what is it exactly that the DA mean when they say where they govern better, when a black child had to first die for the drain to be fixed? I thank you.
Shameful DA.
NFP members, yeah, order. NFP, okay. ANC.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, through the Marine and Coastal Operations for Southern Africa Consortium, has received one of 12 Global Monitoring for Environment, Security and Africa programs, e-stations that enable access to critical Earth observation data. The installation of the European-funded and African Union-managed program will enable regional partners and various research academic and industry organizations access to the EO data and the portal to support the implementation of sustainable development policies at continental, regional, and national level. Installation of the e-station at the Pretoria campus was completed in June this year. The project aimed to maintain, further develop, and provide a sustainable platform for local institutional, human, and technical capabilities across Southern Africa countries. The e-station is an operational, distributable, open source data processing tool that aims to build and strengthen capacities in Africa to receive, process, analyze, and exploit EO data for environmental management. It consists of an outdoor and indoor unit. There is currently no other active e-station for marine and coastal application in the Southern Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yay.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On the 7th of February 2020, 8-year-old Tasnay van Wyk from Ravensmead walked to the tuck shop opposite her home, never to return. 12 days later, Tasnay was found, raped, mutilated, and murdered, left in a stormwater drain along the N1 highway. With a serious criminal record dating back decades, the suspect entered society having passed the tick box exercise of the parole board. He had absconded parole conditions before Tasnay's murder. President Ramaphosa, the Minister for Justice and Correctional Services, Minister for Social Development, Minister for Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, Minister for Police, all visited Tasnay's family to offer condolences. After all these high-profile visits, public apology, and commitment for swift justice, the case is once again postponed for the 6th time to the 16th of May, 2022. If this visit was not just a publicity stunt, the President and the Ministers must honor their commitment. Swift justice must prevail, not only to bring closure and healing to Tasnay's family and the community, but to restore South Africans' faith and confidence in the justice system. Thank you.
Thank you. EFF.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. On the 2nd of December 2020, the EFF called and notified the Office of the Minister of Employment and Labour about JJ Wagner Budere, where the farm owner claimed tariffs using the names and ID numbers of the workers, but never gave it to them. And upon refusing to sign the document to confirm that they have received their share, they were unfairly dismissed. The Office of the Minister directed the EFF to the Limpopo Labour Center Provincial Head, Ms. Johanna Machaba. Since then, she never contacted the workers nor updated the EFF on the matter. Now, those workers are being sent from pillar to post by the Department of Labor in Limpopo. JJ Wagner has disappeared without giving the workers necessary documentation to claim their UIF and Provident Fund. Some of the workers, Deputy Speaker, have worked on that farm for close to 20 years and have nowhere to go, as they have now been evicted by JJ Wagner. Deputy Speaker, the EFF calls upon the Office of the Minister to make sure that Mr. JJ Wagner is reported to the police with regard to the fraud he committed during his meeting with the EFF. He admitted that he did claim the tax though COVID-19 never affected his farming activities. Those workers must be helped to locate JJ Wagner.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. ANC.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The recently formed partnership between the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and International Financial Services firm, JP Morgan, will see an equity equivalent fund established that hopes to unlock 2 billion to 8 small businesses. The Abadali Equity Equivalent Investment Program seeks to support small businesses, medium and micro enterprises, especially in the green economy and manufacturing, with funding and mentorship. The goal is to create 1,000 new jobs, mostly from the green and industrial sectors. South African small businesses are widely regarded as a potential source of jobs growth, but it has been having challenges even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Abadali will see JP Morgan investment of 340 million into loans and grants for small businesses, as well as offering short and medium and long-term finance to qualified firms over an 8-year period. We commend JP Morgan for being the first international financial services firm to participate in such a program alongside of government.
Your time has expired, ma'am.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable, the PAC.
No, Ndate, I'm not speaking.
Okay, ANC. The ANC.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. We welcome the reintegration of approximately 860 refugees into communities or whom have voluntarily returned to their country of origin. This comes in the wake of about 1,500 refugees and asylum seekers who were accommodated in Belleville at Payne City and Wingfield in Kensington in Cape Town. This group first occupied the Central Methodist Church in Cape Town and had protested outside the UN High Commissioner for Refugees offices in 2019, demanding relocation to other countries. They were then moved to the two sites to prevent the spread of COVID-19 last year. They were given the option to either reintegrate into communities or repatriate back to their home countries. 305 individuals have voluntarily departed from South Africa, and UNHCR has provided assistance for people willing to reintegrate back in the local communities or repatriate to their countries of origin as part of their mandate. Interested refugees were offered a reintegration package to cover basic rentals and necessities for 3 months, as well as counseling support. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes member statements. And before I ask for ministerial responses, I would like to just remind us that the rules of the National Assembly in your book of rules suggest that the rules must be strictly adhered to by members. Secondly, number 10, section 10 there, under contempt says a member who willfully fails and refuses to obey any rule order or resolution of the House may be found guilty of contempt of Parliament in terms of the Powers and Privileges Act of 2004. And finally, under Section 69, grossly disorderly conduct, repeatedly undermining the authority of the presiding officer or repeatedly refusing to obey rulings of the presiding officer or repeatedly disrespecting and interrupting the presiding officer while the latter is addressing the House is wrong. So I'm reading this to remind us and to say that please, so that, we do appreciate on behalf of other presiding officers that life happens. But when you're asked to stop, we appreciate those who stop without resisting and debating. This is appropriate. I thought I should remind us of that and then invite any ministerial responses on the statement presented by members.
Chair. Merci. Merci. Chair, merci.
Who's raising any ministerial responses? Do I see anybody?
Merci.
Merci. Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I've noted the issue raised by the honourable member from the EFF. The matter is still under investigations. We'll be able to give a report back later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deputy Speaker Maslovo. Maslovo.
Chrissy.
Go ahead, Chrissy.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I want to welcome the e-station that was recently installed on the premises of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. The Earth-based observation services provided include sea state information in support of search and rescue efforts, harmful algal bloom monitoring for aquaculture, coral bleach alerts for ecosystem management, and vessel monitoring for maritime domain awareness and enforcement. Additional services planned in the near future include water quality monitoring and oil bilge detection. I also would like to remind Honourable Paulson that throughout the emergency regulations, small-scale fishing has been a service that has been allowed in its entirety. And we have on numerous occasions updated the Portfolio Committee and the public at large on the support functions we have given to small-scale fishing to allow these fishermen and women to earn a viable income despite the emergency restrictions. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable one. Honorable.
Followed by Maslovo.
Followed by Maslovo.
And Manamela.
No, go ahead, Ndate.
And Manamela.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairperson. The police.
Honorable Kele, Deputy Minister. Please.
Thanks very much, Deputy Speaker. This is in reply to the statement by Honorable Daum. Indeed, we welcome the contribution by JP Morgan and their participation in our equity equivalent investment program of around 340 million rand. This has the potential to unlock about 8 billion down the value chain. The JP Morgan has already undertaken to increase this investment to 386 during implementation. I want to point out that JP Morgan now adds to about 19 other multinationals who are participating in the program. The program now stands at 8 billion rand of investment. Thanks very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Mahlobo.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. There were three members that raised issues. The first one, Eastern Cape Ndlambe. We want to confirm, Chair, that we are very pleased with the intervention done by the province through Premier Mabuyane and ourselves. An amount of 100 million has been put in. The prowess of technology of using seawater, but also using wastewater, has come in very handy to confirm the correctness of the ANC-led government position on water mix. And we are very happy that this plant, Chairperson, will be commissioned the second part on the wastewater use part of it by the end of September. We're there with the Minister and the Premier, and it will help to relieve the issues of lack of water in Ndlambe, especially in Port Alfred, but also re-stimulate the issues of tourism as part of economic development. Lastly, on this matter, we are also using technology beyond of reverse osmosis on atmospheric water solution, where you trap the air, convert the air into water is one of the solutions we're looking at. On the question of the member that raised issues from Free State Chairperson, with your permission, the issues of Mwate, we've done an assessment. The province in Free State, as we've met with them, including the department, we did send our engineers on the ground. We understood the problem that the assets were not doing well. There was a blockage and vandalism. We can confirm now, Chairperson, that through our intervention, currently water is running them. We are also helping Mwate municipality to finish the refurbishment of the treatment plant. We are currently at 99%, and an additional 26.5 million has been put aside to help them with issues of wastewater management. In Machabeng, there are issues there. We know that there is vandalism of infrastructure. The sewer is running in the street. We want to work with our communities to stop the vandalism of critical infrastructure, but we are also inputting in terms of budget in the upgrade of that infrastructure in the Free State. The last matter that was raised, Chairperson, is in the Western Cape. We want to join our honorable member from the ANC for passing our condolences on behalf of government for the unfortunate incident where a child had to pass on because of issues of neglect. We will work with the city of Cape Town and other water services authorities that water and sanitation infrastructure is secured and manholes are attended to. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. On the killing and cold-blooded killing of Barita Deukaran, the police have responded on the 26th August by arresting 7 people, though one of those people, the case has been withdrawn, and people arrested, as it has been said, they came from province of KwaZulu-Natal. Their names have been given because they have been appeared in court, which is Pagamile Hadebe, Zita Hadebe, Pinda Ndlovu, Sanele Mbele, Spiwe Mazibugo, and Sipigayiswa Jaja. And these were things found in their possession: one unlicensed firearm, one licensed pistol, VW Polo motor car, white Toyota Hilux, and 18 cell phones that are in the hands of the police right now, trying to find more information on them. They are going to court on the 13th of September for the bail application, which we hope to oppose successfully, because they gave the wrong addresses of Gauteng when they've been only 3 weeks in Gauteng and did not give their addresses or KZN where they come from. So the matter is there. The second matter raised is a matter of the firing at the funeral
of Comrade Kebima Mapatwa. 2 cases there, Chairperson, have been opened. It's a Becker-Star 48/9/21 with 3 charges as follows. Those charges is DMA regulation, is Firearm and Ammunition Act, and the robbery of the video campaign. The police are continuing to investigate on that one. But another case that happens in the bureau site has been opened. That is Sophia Town, case number 68/9/2021, with 3 charges: DMA regulation, contravention, firearm contravention, and attempted murder because somebody got injured on the leg. Chairperson, it must be said that police were there, but police, they try by all means to avoid the confrontation. When people are armed there were other people attending the funeral. So there could have been exchange of fire and innocent people die. It doesn't mean that if the arrest is delayed, there's no arrest. So it had to be delayed, that arrest, and is continuing the investigation. On Ms. Majosi, a lot of problem as she raised, but there is a lot of good work. The police have worked very good and very in a best way dealing with the communities in protection of the property, in protection of the communities when that thing in July happened. The last case raised in Cape Town, the case is in court. The less we say about it, the best, because it's in court. Thanks very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable Maname.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Acknowledging the statement on the from the ANC on the Earth observation data for environmental management, and just to add on that the CSIR through the Marine and Coastal Operation for Southern Africa consortium contract with the African Union, that we've successfully installed the UMESAT SE station on the 30th of June 2021, and the setup is being processed by the South African National Space Agency. The E-station is providing data from the Sentinel products for Southern Africa to benefit Global Monitoring for Environment and Security Africa, or GMES, and Africa participants. The received data is mainly terrestrial data. Whilst the installation was successful, Deputy Speaker, the data products for the ocean are limited mostly to chlorophyll and sea surface temperature. Also, there is no Copernicus automation identification system to assist in the ship traffic services, and the CSIR will be looking into this, and the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast for sea rescue and fisheries services. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. The last ministerial response will be done by Honorable Mutsaledi. I'm sorry, members. Unfortunately, there are only 6 spaces. So, yeah. Is it 7? Okay. Now, you have read rules more than me. This is fascinating. Honorable Papu, you didn't tip me. What's wrong with you these days? Okay. In that case, the names I have is Mutsaledi and Godan. Oh, yeah. Then so Mutsaledi, we have finished after you. There will be 7. There will be 7 spoken. Okay, Ngate Kutsala Pilimshanis, Kubege.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. On the question that was asked by the statement made by Honorable Sukers of the ACDP, she got it right when she said the healthcare workers depended so much on the community healthcare workers in terms of supporting our HIV programs. That was very correct, but then she didn't get it right when she says on our campaign mobilization on COVID-19, we are not using and having this cadre of workers participating. They contribute significantly to this public health on education, health education, and health promotion. In fact, COVID-19 has a lot of social behavioral changes that we need to actually inculcate to our society. And the best cadre of leaders there are healthcare workers. Now, we would want to continue encouraging her to check the information that is coming in from various provinces, in particular Limpopo and Western Cape, that currently we are sitting at over 70% of the senior citizens, that is 70 years and above, people who have been vaccinated. So the people who have been on the ground, more than all of us, are the healthcare workers. So I think that is probably not actually correct to say we have shunned away from the people we know. They've contributed so much to strengthen our health systems previously on HIV, TB. We continue to use them and they continue to contribute again in this type of a pandemic that we face. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Ngiyathemba nami uyangifaka kuleyo list yaba over 60 who vaccinated. Ungangishiyi ngaphandle. Thank you very much. Honorable members, that concludes ministerial responses.
What about me? Honorable Speaker, what about me?
No, then 7 ministerial responses are done, sir. Unfortunately, we can't add you. We did.
Me before Domo, how did you overtake me?
Because you didn't speak, so we proceeded. I'm sorry.
No, I raised my hand, so it means the system is not working. Others were shouting when I raised my hand.
Don't debate it. I'm afraid the time is gone for ministerial responses.
I'm just informing you that I raised my hand while the others were shouting. In future,
Honorable Mutsaledi, don't do that. Don't do that, please. With respect, I said to you, the time is gone. So there's no way we can reverse it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Honorable Mazoni, you've been on your feet as I address the House. You know that's out of order, right?
But you were looking at me, Deputy Speaker. I was wondering when you were going to say my name.
No, that's not that's not in the rules, Honorable Mazoni. That when I look at you, you must stand. No.
But I respect you that much, so that I want to stand when you look
Go
at me.
ahead.
Deputy Speaker, all jokes aside, I want to say that I am so pleased at how this particular session just went. Because I want to complain, but I must also be the first one to compliment that we actually have ministers who are now wanting and waiting to speak. They have finally answered our prayers for them to come, and I think that that is a very good sign going forward. Thank you very much, Speaker.
And yes, Honorable.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Now usiyasukuma ngibuka nje.
Ngoba mawusibheka uyasukumisa.
Go ahead, Honorable Member.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. In seconding what Honorable Mazoni is saying, last time it was not very good, and we pledged our support to the motion to say we are going to make it a point that ministers appear and respond to questions, and want to thank them very much. If we can increase up to 10,
yes,
inside.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll support that.
On a point of order, Deputy Speaker.
What's the point of order? What's the point of order? What's the point of order?
Yes, Deputy Speaker. No, Deputy Speaker. Finally, they are doing their work. We can't praise a fish for swimming. This is their work. They must come to work when they need to come to work. And the Honorable Mothaledi mustn't think this is the ANC.
Give compliment where is due.
We want to see them every time as vigor as this, not because it's local government elections. Now they are all running and even fighting you to want to speak. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. I will not enter the politics, but it is especially during elections that everybody must speak to the public that represented them. Everybody across the aisles. It's your obligation. Otherwise, you are breaking the constitutional requirement for public engagement. Robustly.
We must speak throughout the years, not only on elections, throughout. Now he even wants to run through the screen to want to.
Natasha Ntangweni, honorable member, don't speak when you want to. And I read the rules here that you are violating. There are others that I didn't read and you are violating them. Please don't do that. Assembly, Ekfra.
Deputy Speaker, may I rise on a point of order?
What's the point of order?
Deputy Speaker, I just want to point out that's why I call myself Tasha and not Natasha.
No. Honorable members, no. Honorable Chief Whip of the Opposition, please don't go there. Honorable members, no.
Deputy Speaker, that's why I called myself Alake and not Natasha no more. But she wouldn't know because Kangat Gabe's call.
Okay. Let's alter beta or the assembly.
Let's go back to school that time.
Honorable members, yes. Chief Whip, please keep your name to yourself. Assembly, we'll read it when your time comes. Yeah? Honorable members, the Secretary will read the first order.
Consideration of report of Standing Committee on Finance on Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill.
The Chief Whip, Castellina.
Yeah, I'm none of the Natashas, I'm Castellina. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I move that this report be adopted.
Honorable members, the motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the second order.
Second reading debate, Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill.
The list of speakers, let me just get the financial sector one? Okay. Honorable members, we now invite Honorable Maswangani.
Nakensa, Deputy Speaker, Swiro, Soendlamlau, Vaholobze, Amlosa. Ndikombela kwendla xiviko xa komiti ya swa timali hi mayelana na nawumbisi wa Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill. The Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill seeks to establish a framework for the resolution of banks, systematically imported non-bank financial institutions, and the holding companies of these institutions. The resolution refers to a process during which the resolution authority, which the bill proposes to be the South African Reserve Bank, takes over control and management of the affairs of a designated institution that is failing or is likely to fail in order to restructure or resolve it with the use of resolution tools in a manner that seeks to protect financial stability and minimize the reliance on public funds. The aim of creating a resolution framework is to ensure that the impact of a failure by these institutions is managed in an orderly manner. The bill also makes provision for certain amendments to the Financial Sector Regulation Act 2017. A new chapter 12A through this bill to be inserted in the FSRA in order to deal with the resolution objectives, powers, and functions of the South African Reserve Bank. This new chapter also provides for the establishment of the Deposit Insurance Fund and the establishment of the Corporation for Deposit Insurance, or to administer the fund. The bill will amend 11 legislations. I won't go through those legislations, Honorable Speaker. The amendments will give effect to the objectives of this bill. This bill is part of a suite of measures aimed at financial sector reforms and regulation that began after the global financial crisis of 2008. In 2011, South Africa published a broad policy document titled A Safer Financial Sector to Serve South Africa Better, which outlined cross-cutting reforms for the regulation of systemically improved financial institutions. This culminated into what is referred to as the Twin Peaks. The proposed reforms included the improvement of South Africa's resolution and crisis management framework aimed at managing systemic failures in the financial sector, which this bill is all about. In 2015, the National Treasury, the Reserve Bank, and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, then known as the FSP, published a policy document entitled Strengthening South Africa's Resolution Framework, which formed the basis of proposals contained in this bill. Among these were measures in which banks and systemically important non-bank financial institutions should be resolved, the powers and functions of the Reserve Bank as the resolution authority, and the establishment of a deposit insurance fund. In view of the risk of serious disruptions and potential outright systemic failure to the financial system caused by the failure of a bank, a speedy resolution of designated institutions was viewed to be a more appropriate action than the current framework, which primarily entails curatorship, business rescue proceedings, and judicial management to a lesser extent. Resolution in an orderly fashion, managed and controlled by the Reserve Bank, affords greater protection to depositors and taxpayers who might otherwise have to bail out financially distressed institutions, as it happened in many countries during the global financial crisis. Section 12 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act 2017 already specifically tasks the Reserve Bank to monitor risks to financial stability and to take steps to mitigate those risks. The framework provided for in this bill adds to that framework. It also proposes the establishment of the fund, which will help to ensure that holders of covered deposits at a bank in resolution will have access to their funds. This, in turn, will limit severe financial hardship for bank depositors and limit the exposure of public funds to rescue designated failing financial institutions. The bill further proposes that the funds be financed by premiums from licensed banks, which will be members of the corporations that will administer the fund. The committee was briefed on the bill by the National Treasury and the Reserve Bank on the 16th of March 2021, after the minister had tabled the bill in the National Assembly in August 2020. After receiving the initial briefing, the committee called for public comments and received the submissions from different stakeholders. The stakeholders raised substantive issues with regards to the protection of depositors and competition issues as a result of the powers and functions that will be given to the South African Reserve Bank as a resolution authority. The National Treasury and the Reserve Bank responded to all the written and oral submissions on the 26th of May 2021, clarifying further questions and comments from members and stakeholders. A final updated response document was sent to the committee by the National Treasury and the Reserve Bank on 27 May 2021. On the 2nd of June 2021, the committee deliberated on the bill and adopted this report. The key objectives of the bill are to provide a framework for the resolution of banks and systemic important non-bank financial institutions, designate the Reserve Bank as the resolution authority with commensurate powers and functions, establish the Deposit Insurance Fund and the Corporation for Deposit Insurance, create a creditor hierarchy that ensures the protection of vulnerable depositors when banks undergo a resolution process. The resolution framework is aimed at maintaining financial stability, the protection of depositors, the orderly resolution and management of affairs of designated institutions, ensuring that the critical functions of designated institutions continue, resolution planning, and empowering the Minister of Finance to place designated institutions in resolution. As a resolution authority, the bill gives powers and functions to the South African Reserve Bank, which include the power to remove and replace management and recover monies from those, the power to terminate or assign contractual agreements, the appointment of resolution practitioners with delegated powers, the power to establish bridge institutions and transfer selected assets and liabilities, and lastly, the power to take bail in action while respecting the hierarchy of claims in liquidations. The committee notes that this bill is historic in nature as it introduces the Deposit Insurance Fund and the Corporation for Deposit Insurance, which will administer the fund in South Africa. The committee believes that this scheme is long overdue and will eliminate reliance on public funds to bail out failing banks and non-bank financial institutions. The committee notes that this bill aims to fill a number of legal gaps in the protection of depositors of banks and financial stability in the country. The committee notes and welcomes that the bill seeks to mitigate against lapses by introducing a consolidated resolution framework under the management of the South African Reserve Bank. The committee further notes and welcomes that the bill establishes resolution planning for the non-financial bank institutions. In conclusion, the bill adopted, the committee adopted the bill with amendments. I therefore, Honorable Deputy Speaker, move that the report be adopted. Dakens.
Thank you, Ndate. Honorable George.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. The global financial crisis that swept across the world after it was triggered in the United States in 2007 was at that time the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. Although South Africa did not experience the collapse of financial institutions, the economic fallout resulted in lower growth and drove our unemployment numbers even higher than they were before the crisis. This the result of incoherent and hopelessly inadequate economic policy that left us vulnerable to the global crisis. In November 2009, Max Sisulu, then Speaker of the National Assembly, led a delegation to the United Nations in New York. Our delegation debated the impact of the crisis on our economy and considered how regulators needed to respond to the root causes of the regulatory failure. The result was a report detailing steps to be taken to prevent another crisis in the financial sector. Our economic recovery was slower than other developing economies that emerged stronger after the crisis because government made poor policy choices. Our regulatory response was even slower, with government taking almost a decade to implement a new regulatory framework. The crisis resulted in significant pressure on the global financial system to the extent that a real possibility existed that the system would collapse as large interconnected financial institutions failed. Under these circumstances, they had become too big to fail. And to avert this disaster, governments intervened to bail them out at significant cost to taxpayers. Central banks across the world lowered interest rates and flooded the markets with cash to ensure that the financial system remained liquid. The global response to the crisis in many jurisdictions was to implement the Twin Peaks regulatory model that introduced two regulatory approaches: a macroprudential approach to limit system-wide distress and a microprudential approach to limit distress on individual institutions. This model was eventually implemented in South Africa in 2018 with the establishment of the Prudential Authority tasked with overseeing the soundness of financial institutions and the Financial Sector Conduct Authority responsible for market conduct, regulation, and supervision. The Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill is a continuation of the process that began with the implementation of the Twin Peaks model. Rather than having to bail out failed financial institutions at significant cost to taxpayers, the legislation establishes a process for the financial institution to fail. In the event that an institution is likely to fail or failing, the South African Reserve Bank will be the resolution authority. The Reserve Bank will take control over the institution and implement a resolution framework that aims to protect financial stability and ensure that the impact of the failure is managed. The intention is to enable the institution to fail without putting the financial system at risk and to avoid having to rely on taxpayer bailouts. This also means that depositors in a failed bank carry the risk of its failure. Under these circumstances, it is often the most vulnerable savers who experience the worst consequences, such as pensioners and low-income households. To alleviate that burden, the Deposit Insurance Fund is proposed and a corporation for deposit insurance to administer it. In the event of a failure, bank depositors will be insured to a specific amount, thus softening the financial impact of a failure on them. Financial institutions, like any other business, should fold if they're not viable. The authority does, however, have an obligation to ensure that the institution is effectively monitored and that an intervention can be initiated as early as possible to prevent its failure. The success of the Deposit Insurance Fund will depend on how well it is administered. Banks will pay the insurance premiums and should therefore have oversight over how the Corporation for Deposit Insurance is managed. Government has no money of its own. It all belongs to the people, and the people should not be expected to bail out failing enterprises, even if their failure has potential significant consequences. Government made the wrong policy choices following the crisis. Instead of encouraging entrepreneurs to grow by making business easier to do, it added to the bureaucratic burden of doing business. Instead of designing a pathway out of poverty and unemployment, as its name promised it would, broad-based Black economic empowerment, the biggest government intervention in the history of our economy, created a small, extremely rich elite without any economic growth to show for it. Instead of tackling deep-rooted corruption, it allowed the state to be captured. Government also did exactly what the crisis highlighted they shouldn't do. Instead of allowing the failed, hopelessly bankrupt state-owned enterprises to fail, it bailed them out with the people's money. This crowded out economic growth and opportunity. If the people should not be expected to bail out failed private sector institutions, they should also not be expected to bail out failed state-owned enterprises. Government needs to assure taxpayers that it will not expect them to keep its failed enterprises afloat when they are hopelessly bankrupt, despite the billions in taxpayer funds that have been squandered on them. We now have another crisis in the form of the COVID pandemic, and government's sluggish response is no different. Government is incapable of responding rapidly and consistently makes the wrong choices to the detriment of the most vulnerable members of our society and to the benefit of a few politically connected beneficiaries. It is abundantly clear that the so-called developmental state model that places government at the center of our economy has failed spectacularly. A failed, incapable state at the center of our economy will ensure that our economy never grows stronger and we never break the cycle of unemployment and poverty. The role of government is to provide the services that it gets paid generously to deliver and to create an environment in which individuals can exercise their freedom to become everything that they are capable of being. In 7 weeks' time, the people will decide whether they want more of the same incapable government or whether they want to get things done. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Yako.
Jabulela, Deputy Speaker. The Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill tabled by the Finance Minister seeks to provide some sort of security for depositors who put their hard-earned money into financial institutions. While the bill seeks to address what many will see and accept as sensible and practical measures to safeguard workers, small businesses, pensioners, and taxpayers' money as depositors, the legislation has become an international trend. On paper, yes, the legislation is good, but as a country, we will not be able to legislate systematic and structural challenges that many of our people will face when they entrust financial institutions, mainly banks, with either their money or when they seek financial services. South Africa continues to amend legislation to cater to a financial sector that is one of the most important components of South Africa's economy, which remains untransformed and failing to facilitate meaningful participation of mostly Black people in the economy. And banks are the most untransformed institutions that entrench racism in their system. And only the 5 largest banks collectively hold more than 90% of total banking assets. These are the very same banks that have become revolving doors for senior managers from the South African Reserve Bank, the Treasury, and the Financial Conduct Authority. We are supposed to trust that legislation such as this is not driven by profit. While the bill seeks to give South African Reserve Bank, as the institution entrusted with oversight of banks through the Prudential Authority, some powers, who is getting these powers when the South African Reserve Bank remains in the hands of private interests and not the state? So we must legislate. We must protect depositors. We must safeguard pensioners and small businesses. And yes, we must protect the whole economy to what has not become too big to fail institutions. However, the financial sector, banks in particular, has only become too big to fail institutions in South Africa and worldwide because of the financialization of our livelihoods. As a result, every aspect of our lives is now part of a chain of greed-driven financial transactions. As the EFF, we have proposed the creation of state banks. Despite the commitment by Mr. Ramaphosa that there will be and there is support for the creation of the state banks as early as 2019, there is still no state bank today. We proposed as early as 2019 that government must use shares held by the South African Reserve Bank in African Bank to create a state bank. This too has been ignored, and we are not shocked that the Rothschild, of which Trevor Manuel is a member of its management, is now entrusted with the transaction to sell the Reserve Bank stake in African Bank. Deputy Speaker, we must all remain vigilant. While the proposed deposit insurance scheme is important. We must ensure that this is not another opportunity for profit making, wherein premiums are unaffordable, as it only becomes only insurance for wealthy depositors who already benefit as favorable creditors. We must ensure that we criminalize reckless behavior by people entrusted with depositors' money and loot. This must not be reserved for a few, but all, including white bank managers who have collapsed banks in the past, and there are no consequences. Lastly, we must all accept that we are here today with a bill of this nature because the Reserve Bank continues to fail to transform the financial sector, particularly banks, even with all the legislation that empowers the central bank. We put this institution under a serious microscope and ask difficult questions. And who is the Reserve Bank serving today? I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable E.M. Buthelezi of the IFP.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The Financial Sector Law Amendment Bill intends to, via the South African Reserve Bank, create a long overdue framework for the resolution of banks, systematically important non-bank financial institutions and holding companies of this institution. The IFP notes that once the bill is adopted and in operation, it will eliminate the bailing out of failing banks and hopefully relieve the pressure on our national treasury and provide the necessary protection for depositors. This will provide for the speedy resolution of designated institutions in the event of serious disruption and potential systemic failure of financial systems caused by the failure of a bank. The IFP further echoes the committee's sentiments as regards the establishment of Deposit Insurance Fund and Corporation of Deposit Insurance. This fund existence, Honorable Deputy Speaker, should not allow banks to operate recklessly simply because of this insurance. The IFP will always be in support of mechanisms put in place to hold institutions account. That's why we support the implementation of an effective oversight system for both the fund and corporation as included in this bill. We trust that the legal gaps identified at the start of this process will be covered, Deputy Speaker. However, it must be noted that while we seek to close the gaps in strengthening the legal framework which governs how we spend, transact, and protect our money in this country, we know that this won't change the status quo. What must we do, Deputy Speaker? As the first step, we must amend and remove the party in control of the public purse. This is indeed the biggest gap in the system. The deficit of honest leadership in all levels in our government must be addressed. This deficit has certainly widened the gap between the haves and the have-nots, those who are able to eat lavish dinners and consume expensive beverages, while the rest of our people sit and worry about where their next meal will come from. What we must amend as a matter of public importance is to stop the ongoing looting and corruption at all levels of government. It cannot continue unabated. The erosion of our institutions we have fought for and built during the early years of our democracy is no joke and cannot be left to continue. This bill includes many great intentions to protect our national treasury and does, to an extent, cover banks and institutions which will benefit from its implementation. But let us not forget what we must address first. The IFP support the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Vessels, it's your turn.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the Financial Sector Amendment Bill endeavoured to help the banking sector and South Africa's economy to withstand bank-related storms. It seeks to prevent and mitigate the dire consequences seen following the collapse of the VBS Mutual Bank in 2018 and African Bank in 2014. The Reserve Bank, Deputy Speaker, has the mandate to ensure financial stability. It is of utmost importance that consumers, in most cases the most vulnerable in our society, be protected in the event of a bank's collapse. A resolution regime for banks and financial institutions will introduce a deposit insurance. Further, the bill will bolster legislation such as the Companies Act to protect the economy. Deputy Speaker, the Consolidated Resolution Framework will seek to cure the lapse between the Banks Act, which provides for curatorship, the Companies Act, which provides for business rescue, and the Insolvency Act, which does not recognize depositors as preferred creditors. These pieces of legislation were inadequate in protecting the depositors of banks. The resolution framework is aimed at maintaining financial stability. South Africa is the only country among the G20 not to have a specific deposit insurance. The recent looting of the VBS Mutual Bank by the EFF Fat Cats, to the detriment of the poorest of the poor, proved the need for such resolution framework.
On a point of order.
Yes, what point of order?
There's
What's your-
unfounded information that this voter is giving here, the honorable voter. It's unfounded. No EFF leader have ever been prosecuted or being in court. It was ANC members that have been
Speaker,
always
point
on the
of order.
lineup of the court benches. So he
That's
must
not-
get his
point of
information
order.
straight, Deputy Speaker.
Speaker,
I want you to please call this member off. Take him off. Take her off. Download her, please.
For calling a point of order that is correct. For
Please
calling a
download-
point of order that is correct.
You
For
are-
calling a point of order that is correct. Why
I
are you
said-
scared for this voter?
Take her off, please. Please take her off.
On another honorable member.
She is continuing the violation of the rules. I warned her. She continues. In the first place, this is not a point of order. It's got nothing to do with her privilege or any process matter that is affecting her badly. This is about her debating a political point. That's out of order. We don't accept it, and she must be taken off because she repeatedly violates the necessity for obeying the rules. Take her off, please. Honorable Steve Swart, it's your turn.
May I continue?
Finished. Oh, you've got yeah, sorry, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, honorable member.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
And members, no matter how angry you are, the rules require you to call members not just by their name, as if they're your friends or something. Even if they are, you must obey the rules. This is absolutely objectionable. Go ahead.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The truth
Sorry.
does hurt.
The member who's asking to speak, honorable member, go ahead. What are you raising on?
Respectfully, Honorable Speaker, the last 2 days I was declaring, I was reading a declaration. I was called in the House to order because there were names of the honorable members in the House that were implicated in some of the submissions that I made. I was called into order and I refrained. Now the FF Plus is talking to the issues of theft of a bank. Where have the EFF been implicated? And
honorable member, please, honorable member,
can't be, because it is inconsistent that when we call the FF Plus, we reflect the EFF, and when we call them to order,
honorable, I'm speaking to you. Honorable, because I'm speaking to you. That's not a point of order. Go and read your rules and don't debate the politics of what the honorable member is saying when it's not your turn to speak. This is as simple as that. So you can't, on the grounds that you disagree with his politics, speak and argue a matter when it is not your turn to speak. You're out of order yourself. Go ahead, honorable Vessels.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. The truth does hurt. When a bank fails, it has significant consequences for the economy and
Honorable
consumers.
Deputy Speaker, please call the member of the FF Plus not to provoke us, please.
Look, honorable member, this is parliament. This is a political institution. If you don't want to be provoked, go home and do some farming. And do some farming. No, even there you provoke.
You must not do those racist, especially on the EFF here.
I'm not going to do this anymore. Can you take off, honorable? Please take him off. Please take honorable Kaiser off, please. Please take him off. He must not come back. Honorable Swart, honorable Vessels, please complete your time.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There's something about big dogs and small dogs. But when a bank fails, Deputy Speaker, it has significant consequences for the economy and consumers. We can't afford bailouts of institutions, especially when they are mismanaged and looted. Agbare Young Speaker, om finansiële stabiliteit te verseker, moet ons 'n verantwoordelike regering hê, moet ons ontslaa raak van die politieke elite, soos die EFF, wat steel en wat korrup is. Ons moet ontslaa raak van ANC-lede wat steel en korrup is. En ons moet 'n verantwoordelike regering hê. Dis die enigste manier om die ekonomie op die langtermyn te red. Ek dank u.
Thank you. Honorable Steve Swart.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the ACDP supports this bill, which is drafted in the wider context of the 2008 financial crisis and its consequences, and this was pointed out by previous speakers as well. It is aimed at protecting financial stability, minimizing reliance on public funds, i.e. that is the taxpayer, and securing depositors' funds. And this is in the event that one or any number of South Africa's financial institutions fail in their functions and responsibilities as a result of a systemic financial crisis. This bill and the provisions of it are therefore to be welcomed and supported. And in particular, the ACDP notes the establishment of the Deposit Insurance Fund and the establishment of the Corporation for Deposit Insurance to administer this fund, and that the fund will be financed by premiums from licensed banks, which will be members of the corporation that will administer the fund. Now, we are relatively satisfied that because of this bill, the taxpayers in future will not be required to pay the price of systemic and or institutional failures. And in this regard, we trust that banks in question will be able to absorb the premiums that will be required without passing the cost of these premiums onto clients and their customers. Deputy Speaker, we also appreciate that the committee in its report has warned that the presence of this fund should not cause banks to operate recklessly simply because there is this insurance, and that there should be effective oversight over the fund and over the corporation. And of course, Parliament, in exercising its oversight role, also has an important role in this regard to play. While the ACDP recognizes the financial insecurity and systemic failure that in the interdependent and globalized world can result from the decisions and actions of those beyond our country's borders, we call on the South African financial institutions to operate with discernment and transparency while having the well-being of all stakeholders in mind, and that in particular relating to the depositors. We should remember that the failure of the same institutions in the United States to do just this was instrumental in causing the 2008 global financial crisis, and this must be prevented at all costs. The ACDP will support this bill. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I would like to draw your attention to Rule 92, 8, 9, and 12. No member may raise a point of order again or a similar point of order if the presiding officer has ruled that it is not a point of order or that the matter is out of order. Members may not disrupt proceedings by raising points of order that do not comply with the rules. And if you are unhappy, that's what 12 says. You must say it in writing to the speaker so that the matter is addressed by the speaker and or through the rules committee. Honorable members, this is an ongoing headache in the House. I do not accept it, and I hope that we will collaborate to make sure that it doesn't happen. I read right at the beginning that the rules of the House must be complied with strictly. Please do respect farming. Honorable members, the UDM, is it here? ATM? Good. AIC? Hope? PAC? ANC? Honorable Abraham?
Thank you so much, Honorable Deputy Speaker. It will be important for the National Assembly to remind itself where we are coming from with regards to the Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill of 2020 and the driving role of the African National Congress in placing the Parliament at the center of the financial sector transformation debate. Going back in 2011, some 10 years ago, in 2007-08, the world was plunged into a global economic crisis due to the practice of insider trading, trading in derivatives, manipulation of regulatory processes, and weak or non-existent regulations. Unscrupulous financial institutions and banks in the USA consciously exposing the most vulnerable working class and lower middle strata, many of whom were Black, to offers and loans which they were not in a position to repay. This in particular related to home loans. The result was the start of a global financial collapse. Banks making their profits on debt, and once that debt could not be repaid, panic set in, and the first bank, Lehman Brothers, collapsed, followed by others. The domino effect continued across the globe. South Africa was not spared, albeit that our financial sector regulatory environment has strict checks and balances. Unlike USA, and if we did not have this, we would have suffered even more than we did. We should never forget that we lost 1.3 million jobs. The global crisis renewed the debate on the dangers of unregulated ventures in the financial sector and more broadly, the weaknesses in the economic system of capitalism. As the chair has outlined, National Treasury responded in 2011 with the start of a set of regulatory reforms referred to as Twin Peaks regulatory reforms, designed to tighten up the regulatory environment in the financial sector. Today's amendment bill forms part of the ongoing process of regulatory reforms. The ANC in Parliament, after a number of workshops, began to push through the Standing Committee of Finance the oversight role that Parliament has to play. Public hearings were called and key role players in the financial sectors were summoned. What needs to be borne in mind is that the financial sector is the largest sector in our economy, some 21% of the economy, and like many other countries, our economy has in many respects become financialized. Honorable Buthelezi, those public hearings headed by the African National Congress were called the transformation of the financial sector. They were at the time the biggest public hearings that have been held on the transformation of the financial sector. All strata of the financial sector were summoned to Parliament, and this included the CEOs of the big 4 banks. A parliamentary report was finally tabled in 2017 and debated in the National Assembly. We argued for a financial sector charter to address the transformative and regulatory changes that are needed. The recommendations were taken forward to NEDLEC, who have done the preparatory work for the next summit.
The ANC's 54th National Conference agreed that the 2018 Financial Sector Transformation Summit must provide a clear framework for the acceleration and deepening of transformation in the sector. Critical recommendations included bank charges, but we must state that there has been a reluctance within the sector to act upon such proposals. This is where we expect National Treasury and the Reserve Bank to come in, since the parliamentary process had called upon them to play a very specific role. This was not just about an increased regulatory environment. It is also about a key economic principle of the African National Congress: how we transform the financial sector for it to contribute to building a more inclusive economy in terms of easier access to capital, but also transforming the sector along class, race, and gender lines. It is about new entrants into the financial sector, so long dominated by a monopoly in the financial sector. From the initial summit, we resolved a financial sector charter must be put in place, which has not happened so far. We are dealing with a sector that is dominant and thrives on capital accumulation and consolidating debt for which it receives huge interest. In dealing with the financial sector, we have to minimize risk for those who least can afford it. A major component of this amendment bill is the deposit insurance scheme, as well as a proposed change in the ranking of creditors. Of major concern is the variable risk-weighted premiums in the deposit insurance scheme and the surpluses that will be generated in an environment where there would be no bank failure. Surpluses lie at the heart of the accumulation path of the banking and financial sector, and how these are dealt with require far greater discussion. They are matters of social responsibility for a country like ours. Obviously, the ease of the State Bank, Honorable Yago, is a resolution of the 54th Conference of the African National Congress. That will assist greatly, and this process needs to be speeded up. What we do want to raise here for the Treasury and Reserve Bank is that we cannot, arising out of the passing of this amendment bill, have another round of compliance costs being passed on to the consumer. Compliance is part of the economic responsibility and cost of the financial sector, and they must take economic responsibility for this and not want to pass it on to the consumer every time. With regards to the future, the conduct of financial institutions bill, we need to state that the framework of such draft legislation must align itself with a philosophy that underpins a financial sector charter. The ANC supports the amendment bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now recognize the Honourable Deputy Minister of Finance on the virtual platform.
Thank you, Chair and Honourable Members. I think Honourable Maswanganyi and other Honourable Members have well articulated the purpose of the Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill.
Honourable Deputy Minister, there's something wrong with your screen. I suggest you rather switch it off.
Okay. Is it better now?
That's better, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for that advice. I was not aware. I was saying that Honourable Maswanganyi, the Chair of the committee, and other Honourable Members have well articulated the purpose of the Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill. And we really would like to thank the committee for considering this bill and leading the process of drafting this bill, including the public hearings. Indeed, the bill establishes a deposit insurance scheme to be administered by the Corporation of Deposit Insurance, and this signifies government's recognition that the most vulnerable amongst us should enjoy the strongest protection. And the key features of the deposit insurance scheme are that deposits up to 100,000 per person per bank will be protected. This threshold represents over 90% of bank balances. The deposit insurance scheme will aim to facilitate payment within 7 days, although initially this may take longer. The scheme will also facilitate greater competition by removing the risk of transferring primary banks to smaller banks. The scheme will undertake extensive consumer education to inform depositors of the nature of the coverage to avoid runs onto banks when the stress occurs. In summary, Chair, indeed, the Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill will protect the financial system and the broader economy from the worst effects of any financial crisis. The Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill will do so through enhanced protection of depositors, the requirement for resolution planning, and the creation of a broader range of tools to manage a crisis. The bill is both directly and indirectly socially progressive. Directly, it will provide protection to vulnerable depositors and boost competition. Indirectly, it will protect the fiscus and ensure expenditure is channeled at developmental objective rather than failing banks. We really want to thank the members for considering this bill, and we're looking forward to the implementation of the bill, and we'll rely on this House to further monitor its implementation and making sure that our financial sector is transformed, is competitive, and also protect consumers. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. Are there any objections to the bill being read a second time? No objections agreed to. The Secretary will read the bill a second time.
Financial Sector Laws Amendment Bill.
This bill will be sent to the National Council of Provinces for concurrence. The Secretary will read the third order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Basic Education on second quarterly report on performance of Department of Basic Education in meeting its predetermined objectives for 2020-21.
I now recognize the chairperson of the committee who will introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and let me greet all the members. I want to start by thanking the members of our committee for ongoing cooperation and collaboration in our formidable task of ensuring that at the center of our work, we invest time to scrutinize department's report to make sure that the goal of quality education is achieved, that each child in our school is regarded as a national asset, that each learner in our learning institutions is regarded a national priority. As we reflect on this second quarter report during the month of September, a month in which we celebrate our diverse heritage, diverse languages, and diverse cultures, allow me to express my appreciation to the committee by saying, and I quote, "The best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today," close quote. As we table the second quarterly report, the above citation demonstrates an expression that there is hope and growth in achievement of performance targets, despite the limiting dynamism of the current pandemic.
As we are confronted with the challenges that go alongside with COVID-19 pandemic, the Portfolio Committee ensured that its oversight function in holding the executive accountable is maintained despite the pandemic. On the 15th of February in this year, the Department of Basic Education provided us, as the committee, with an overview of the 2020-2021 second quarter report in relation to planned strategic imperatives and targets as set out in the department's strategic plan and the annual performance plan. Chair, on the basis of what was presented to the committee, the Department of Basic Education strategic plan was revised to reflect more explicitly on the department's core functions of policy development, monitoring implementation of policy, and the oversight role it has to exercise over provinces, as expressed in the National Education Policy Act. In doing so, the department outlined the sector goals which cover the different provincial plans and programs, and in fulfilling its role, the department has in the second quarter outlined its achievements against the set targets. Chair, as we reiterate our unflinching oversight commitment to this House for the 2020-2021 financial year, the quarter two information indicated that the department had a total of 69 indicators for all 5 programs combined. Of the 2020-2021 indicators, 59 annual targets, whilst 9 were annual targets, whilst 9 were quarterly targets, and 1 being a biannual target. At the end of the second quarter of the 2020-2021 financial year, the department had fully achieved 9 targets, which was 90% partially achieved, and 0% did not meet 1, and 1 was 10%. Chair, this achievement is indicative of the collaborative work in the basic education sector, the schools and entities, including the Portfolio Committee approach that is useful where we scrutinize DPE targets to ensure that the department meet its target. The achievement of the 90% target also signifies commendable growth in the sector and effective oversight function over the executive. And then we are dealing with 5 programs in the department that I won't be really mentioning because of time. Under the financial report, the second quarter expenditure with regards to the adjusted budget, the department for the 2021 financial year, it amounted to 23.233 billion. The total actual expenditure of the department for the 2020-21 financial year second quarter amounted to 12.851 billion. Expenditure amounts to 11.894 billion was made up of transfer payments as follows, which was the conditional grants 10 billion and the public entity 78 billion, and other transfers which was 1 billion. And the remainder also expenditure, which is 9 billion, is made up of the following, which is compensation of employees, examiners of moderators, earmarked funds, departmental operations, and so on. Now, as we are concluding, our nation is expected of a better society in abiding with his vision and enthusiasm of our people. As the members of the Portfolio Committee, we have an ongoing constructive engagement with the Department of Basic Education to consider the challenges and improve the areas where recommendations as made. We therefore ask the House to accept and adopt the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make a declaration, the opportunity to do so. The Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Portfolio Committee on Basic Education has a massive responsibility of ensuring that the financial and non-financial targets set by the Department of Basic Education, by ensuring that the targets set by the Department of Basic Education, and ensuring that they achieve their targets and have a tangible impact on the sector as a whole, especially for a conducive learning environment or to attain opportunity through education. The DA would like to commend the department for meeting 90% of its targets. However, we would like to also register our grave concerns about the performance of the department in 3 specific areas generally, and in 1 for the second quarter in particular. 1, budget cuts of 2.2 billion from the infrastructure grant and further underspending on Program 4 and Program 2 has resulted in the department removing schools made of mud and asbestos from the SAFE and ASIDI programs. As a result, only 22 schools out of 2,400 with no access to water were provided assistance, yet are expected to use water as a first line of defense against COVID-19. More concerning is that only 288 schools were provided with sanitation assistance, yet learners in 4,200 schools were at risk of dying in pit toilets, despite President Ramaphosa promising that by 2020 March, pit toilets will be a thing of the past. A number of schools, including E.T. Tabani in my constituency, have been removed from their CD program to be built. As a result, only 4 schools of the 21 envisaged to be built are under construction. Furthermore, implementing agents are building schools far more than their going value, and in some instances with poor quality with no consequences for incomplete or poor work done, like Mfundo in Mpumalanga, which has been built on a wetland. Number 2, our concern is the curriculum relevance, monitoring and performance targets for matrics achievements, particularly in the second quarter. The number of schools participating in coding, robotics, maritime, school using ICT and entrepreneurship must be reviewed in order for the department to accelerate the need to offer a curriculum that offers skills desperately needed by the economy so that young people can participate. Number 3, safety and security measures in schools is a concern. Over 1,800 schools have been vandalized to date, looted or torched from March 2020 to date. This has cost the department over 226 million. Despite this being raised almost every meeting, there seems to be no impactful plan in place. The DA therefore recommends that the department should find a way of ensuring that budget cuts do not compromise the core function of the department, such as getting rid of mud and dilapidated asbestos or pit toilets, by engaging Treasury on identified areas for such cuts to limit any negative impact. Furthermore, National Treasury must assist in deregistering implementing agents that compromise the building or affordability of quality schools. DBE must invite UCT to learn from the online school as an innovation that can alleviate overcrowding in classrooms, the increased pressure of building schools, and as a mechanism to strengthen the curriculum. Let's use these COVID-19 lessons to our advantage rather than making them an excuse. Thirdly, a full curriculum review must be instituted across all the types of schooling in the sector with a specific focus on specialization schools, collaboration schools, and skills needed by the economy to avoid creating a further generation dependent on grants and, despite them having been through school, are not able to participate in the economy. This means more robotics, coding, aviation, maritime, entrepreneurship, and innovation schools to be targeted by DBE. Second, lastly, a district and circuit approach, security cluster, communities, public works, and DBE safety and security plan must be developed to win the war against vandalism, syndicate theft, and arson in schools. Lastly, targets set by the department must not be a box-ticking exercise, but must be set to make tangible impact on the ground. The DA therefore notes this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. This report marks the road of our basic education that is otherwise well known in society. It fails to report that many rural towns have no facilities for disabled children or children with autism. As a result, many of these children are denied education opportunities. It fails to report that there are small towns in this country, such as Raidbrown in the Eastern Cape, where there is no high school at all, and that after grade 7, children have to go to the nearest high school, which is located in Willowmore, about 68 kilometers away. The cost of transport between Raidbrown and Willowmore is about 200 rands for a return trip. That is 1,000 rand per week for each child and 4,000 per month. As a result, many of these children just drop out of school because no parent can afford that kind of transportation. These are children that are condemned to a life of unemployment and suffering from an early age by the Department of Education. Obviously, these children are Black. The department would not even dare ignore the plight of white children as it does to that of Black children. There are many instances of this nature, such as the plight of the children of Mbindweni in Libode in the Eastern Cape, who have to start walking to school at 4 o'clock every morning in order to get to the classroom at 10 in the morning. No government worth the name can ever do this to the future of the nation. The performance report that get tabled in this house every so often hide these facts. They hide the pain that majority suffer, and they hide the neglect and incompetence of the department. They hide the fact that the department throws out of the system at least 500,000 children each year, and that there is no one who accounts for the whereabouts of these children. We all know that they too are condemned to a life of hard labor and suffering. We therefore reject this report and reject the shameless neglect this department shows to millions of Black learners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The IFP.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. It is undeniable that the COVID-19 pandemic had and continues to have a major impact on access to vulnerable in our society. We cannot, however, allow this pandemic to further deepen the equality gap in South Africa, especially relating to education. As a country, this must be one of our key priorities in these uncertain times. Upon consideration of the Department of Basic Education's report on its performance in the second quarter of 2020-2021, the IFP wholeheartedly agrees with the committee's recommendations that the department should urgently find ways to ensure budget cuts do not compromise core projects of the department. The department should also engage with National Treasury on how to limit such negative impacts. The IFP, however, remains highly concerned about the slow progress in building the new schools and completing the accelerated school infrastructure delivery initiative. According to the report, at the end of the second quarter, only 4 schools were built, and the pandemic was blamed for affecting construction work. Furthermore, the number of schools provided with sanitation facilities at the end of the second quarter stood only at 22 schools. Again, the pandemic was blamed for the slow progress. The IFP acknowledges the impact of the pandemic on construction. However, we wish to stress the importance of providing safe schools, as well as the department's long history of failure to deliver on improving schools and ensuring safe sanitation facilities. We therefore cannot accept this slow progress. This needs to be a critical priority for the department and cannot be blamed on pandemic. The IFP furthermore agrees with the committee that the issue of safety and security at schools remains a major problem and should be urgently addressed by the department. Less than 3 weeks ago, we read about the horrifying rape of a 6-year-old grade 1 at the Kensani Primary School in Tshwane, which allegedly happened in the school toilets. This shocking news is worthy of a great outcry, and we demand answers from the department. As the custodian of basic education, the department has the constitutional mandate and responsibility to ensure that schools are safe and secure. The IFP will remain committed to demanding answers and holding this department accountable. The future of South Africa cannot and should not be squandered. The IFP accepts the report, Satembe.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The FF Plus.
Point of order, Chair.
What is the point of order, Honourable Member?
Chairperson, if you will check, because we are on virtual, we can see that the Deputy Minister of Small Business, he left his video on, and clearly he's displaying to us this is how they take how they take Parliament serious.
Thank you, Honourable Member. We'll check on that. The next speaker is from the FF Plus. The FF Plus, the ACDP.
Thank you, Chair. Honourable Chair, the ACDP notes the department reached 76% of its target in the Adolescent Girls and Young Women program. This comes against the backdrop of a disturbing report on the increase of pregnancies among preteen and teenage girls. It is our contention that these programs of DBE, specifically CSE, is failing, given that according to the department, CSE has been part of the curriculum since 2000. The program is failing firstly because the DBE does not have relevant, detailed, and up-to-date research on learner pregnancies. Dr. Grenville Whittle admitted today in committee that this was because of the cost of research, that we therefore have to rely on third parties. The DBE will have to shift resources within its budget to focus on the research. We are failing to use big data and artificial intelligence to improve efficiencies given our limited resources in regard to these programs. For example, Chair, the little research we do have shows that the average boy who is sexually active has 6 partners. Our approach is to try and sweet talk these sweet talkers with nice words and pictures to educate them. We need rather identify the characteristics of this group and specifically target boys who are likely to behave in this way with focused interventions. Secondly, the landscape has significantly changed with the advent of social media and with it new forms of abuse that affects all children. Please do not think that any racial or economic group is exempt from this. The only way the DBE can keep up is to have robust engagement with civil society, and not only with friendlies, but especially with those who seem to disagree with them. The DBE needs a robust 21st century engagement policy. Finally, the DBE needs to understand their role. If they think they can replace parents and the community, including churches and traditional leaders, they are gravely mistaken, and their programs will continue to fail. They must understand that they are there to support, not to usurp the rights of parents, extended families, and communities. Parents and where there are not parents, extended family and communities come first, then the DBE and the rest of the state. To quote the UN Charter for Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26.3, parents have a prior right to choose the kind of education that shall be given to their children. We are Africans. Do not undermine our people by telling them what they must know. Ask them, respect their beliefs, engage their wisdom to create the solutions for the challenges we face with the children of our nation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The ATM, the UDM, Board, the AIC, COPE, PAC, Al-Jamaa, and the ANC. It seems to me you have a special water there, Honourable Member. We would have supplied you with a complimentary one anyway.
Yes, Honourable Tashi. Yes, no, thank you very much, Honourable Chair. To create a better life for all, the NC believes that building an ethical and capable developmental state will propel such realization. A developmental state should have the capacity to plan, implement, and innovate. The capacity of the state is also enhanced by the human capability development of the nation. Basic education plays a critical foundational base for the cognitive development of our children. It is through education that we can create equal opportunities for all South Africans. Education is a critical imperative for the development of our country, with opportunities for all South Africans. As part of our oversight function, performance reporting is critical in ensuring accountability by the executive on implementation of the predetermined outcome objectives as set in the APP of 2020-2021. The department had 9 indicators in this period, which they reported at a quarterly basis, while the remaining 57, which many of our members here from the opposition were talking about, are annual indicators. The department implementation of infrastructure projects were impacted by the Disaster Act regulation as the construction sector was impacted by the restrictions of COVID-19 alert levels. The implementation of the Educator Employment Initiative has also come with its own challenges, which can be caused by different factors, such as submission of wrong banking details, which has delayed payments. In relation to the core work of the School of Teaching and Learning on curriculum recovery, the provincial education departments have developed their different curriculum recovery plans in order to recover lost time for teaching. The biggest impact of the pandemic on our schools is the hampering of curriculum coverage. Learners from schools with ICT facilities and access to digital devices in their homes managed to continue learning during the school closure, while the learners without the support lost a crucial learning time. The impact of learning loss to this group of learners will continue to impact their curriculum coverage relative to previous grades. In addressing security challenges, partnership with the South African Police Service should be tightened and integrated to the continuous work of SGBs. The budget representation have also impacted negatively the infrastructure grant despite the major backlog in social infrastructure. The budget reprioritization for the fight against the coronavirus pandemic was significant at about 2.1 billion rand. This impact will be significant, but government interventions through specific infrastructure initiatives such as the Accelerated School Infrastructure Development Initiative programs will continuously address the backlog. ANC remains committed in the fight against corruption, and the overall performance of the department will be considered in the fourth quarter report or on the annual report to assess whether the department delivered on its target. And before we move to conclusions, I think it's important that we deal with a few misconceptions that would have been said here today. And I think it's important to start that by saying, Honorable note that of the DA and from the EFF, they speak about the APPs. Their targets are not they are not related to this quarter, second quarter report, their own APPs. And you know, this is the report that we are considering here today. I think which speaks also about the good work that the department, the minister, deputy minister, the DG and the department at large and their team have done a good job in the second quarter here, because if they did not do a good job, I'm sure they will be speaking about issues that are under consideration for this report, but they're talking about EPPs. But I think it's also important to remind them the process of adopting APPs. Our colleagues there, they never contribute to these things because APPs, it's not a department that comes and imposes. They bring it to the committee and the committee contributes to those things instead of them. I mean, but we understand it's election time. So you know, these are the nice opportunities for them to try and lobby people based on non-factual things. So they must not come here and argue as if they were dealing with APPs. If they want to deal with APPs, they know where to find the committee. We're very ready there for them. But here we're dealing with the second quarter report. But also that is true to their colors, very dangerous to a country to come and sit in front of this podium, in front of millions of people, and lie to them, talking about APPs and not the second quarter report. Honorable Sukers, again, I think it's also important to note that misleading people is a sin. I mean, from the ACDP, we must understand it's a sin to mislead people, to come here and say that DBE wants to replace parents, communities, on such critical issues. I mean, you mentioning what we're dealing with today, Honorable Chair, issues of GBV, issues of rape, issues of teen pregnancies. Honorable Sukers comes in and said that DBE wants to, replace those stakeholders, whereas it was the Deputy Minister on that platform who told her that this thing is not a departmental problem, it's a societal problem. It needs everybody else to be part of this particular thing in order for us to try and defeat it. But I thought we must just, I think to the IFP, thank you very much. I'm sure you will support the report, even those who have noted the report, despite you trying to, electioneer, we know that we are going to support the report because it is a true reflection, 90% attainment of targets in the second quarter, and slip up in place. And they also can demos Tashi. So thank you very much, Honorable. The NC supports the report on the second quarter performance of the department 2020-2021. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, Stephen.
I rise on a point of order.
Yes, what is a point of order?
House Chair, on a point of order, the honourable member kept referring to us having to stand at the podium and campaign. What he doesn't realise is that we don't really need to campaign because the ANC have hardly put in
That's
any
not a point of order.
So don't worry about
not
that.
Not a point of order, honourable member.
House Chair, Steve Swart here.
Yes, honourable member.
House Chair, I rise on a point of order, and I'd ask you maybe to look at the record as to the aspersion that was cast on Ms. Sukers, that she has committed sin, that she misled the House, and I'd ask you maybe to check the record as to whether that comment is unparliamentary. Thank you.
Honourable Swart, I must remind you that points of order must be raised at the time when the alleged breach of the rules have taken place. We have moved on from that point. I listened to what the honourable member has said, and unfortunately, you did not raise a point of order at the time. I will now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Enkosi kakhulu, sihlalo wosihlalo. Ndiphakamisa into yoba le ndlu mayamkele le ngxelo ithiwe thaca apha ibonakalisa impumelelo. Enkosi.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Can you observe the rejection by the EFF?
The objection of the EFF is noted. For those objections, the report is agreed to. The Secretary will read the fourth order.
Consideration of report of Portfolio Committee on Basic Education on Oversight visit to Gauteng Province, Ekurhuleni North Education District, and Eastern Cape Province, Matatiele and Mount Fletcher Education Districts.
I now recognize the chairperson of the committee who will introduce the report.
No, thanks, Chair. We are sharing to the House the oversight visit which we had in Gauteng Province, in KwaZulu-Natal, and in the Eastern Cape. We are committed to give these three provinces priority because it is important to implement the constitutional objectives of oversight over the work of the executive in order to attain progressive quality learning and teaching in our schools. The education agenda reminds us that we show similar commitment to vastly deep rural areas and never forget, no waver in our focus in supporting them, thus building strong institutions. Honorable Chair, we identified Gauteng, KZN, and Eastern Cape because the most vulnerable of our society are confined in rural communities. With scarcity of resources, KZN and Eastern Cape provinces have the potential, while addressing skill gap in the local bases, We have to change the conversation so that our efforts also advance skills in rural areas to become schools of excellence as part of our national agenda. Our obligations for the oversight effectively took place from the 31st January to the 6th of February in this year, and districts that were visited is Ekurhuleni North in Gauteng, Ixopo and Umzimkhulu Education District in KwaZulu-Natal, Matatiele and Mount Fletcher in the Eastern Cape. Our focus primarily in terms of purpose set out to do the oversight visits to assess the reopening of schools and the state of school readiness for the 2021 academic year. This included, among others, the following areas of focus: the status and impact of COVID-19 lockdown on the reopening of schools, the regulations, the PPE procurement essentials, curriculum coverage, infrastructure, water and sanitation, scholar transport, and school nutrition. Also, it was included. The state of the admission and registration of learners, the provision of learner-teacher support materials, the staff establishment, the SGB vital role in school governance, the measures to deal with dropouts rates and return of learners, the access to ICT, the visual platforms for learners during this pandemic, and practical support spectrum for educators, non-teaching staff, and learners impacted by COVID-19. Honorable Chair, the delegation held meetings with all relevant stakeholders in order to gain first-hand information on the state of schooling and to discuss various challenges faced in the Provincial Education Department as affected districts, specifically in response of the COVID-19 regulations. In partnership with members of the Provincial Legislatures, Committee on Education, members of the Provincial Department of Education and National Department of Basic Education, this stakeholder came to their support during the oversight visit. The conversation also included the effort from SAPA, the education unions, the SGB, and the association, of which we are thankful for their intensified effort to support the schools in their provinces. Now, under the recommendations, Chair, as members of the Committee on Basic Education, having conducted the oversight visit and having considered the issues that were highlighted, we are resolute that the Minister of Basic Education must address and ensure these provinces. These are the issues that she needs to address under the infrastructure. You need to ensure that all schools in the provinces receive the necessary infrastructure and resources where such was reported to the Portfolio Committee. And under the water and sanitation, we are saying they need to ensure that schools are supplied with adequate water supply through collaboration with municipalities, digging boreholes and ensure water tanks are filled as required. Under technical mathematics and science, we are saying they need to ensure that educators who taught this subject receive ongoing support, training and development. Under psychosocial support, we are saying in collaboration with the Department of Health and Social Development, they need to ensure that both educators and learners had the services of psychologists and social workers to assist with the mental health support. Under educators with comorbidities, they must be accommodated. Where teachers applied for leave, this should be processed and managed. Under the overcrowding, we are saying they need to ensure that schools were monitored to check implementation of admission policy, not to accept more learners that they cannot accommodate. So it goes on, Honorable Chair, the school transport as well, the school safety and security. And we are then, in conclusion, saying that we are thanking the members of the committee, the provincial reps, DPE, and all stakeholders. We are therefore moving that the House accept the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will now recognize political parties wishing to make declaration the opportunity to do so. The Democratic Alliance.
Chairperson, oversight visits are of the most effective tools for testing the realities painted in boardrooms by ministers and their departments versus the realities that we daily live on the ground. It is an opportunity for MPs to monitor whether taxpayers' money is being used to create a conducive learning environment. The February oversight visits in Gauteng, KZN, and the Eastern Cape followed a series of oversights conducted by myself and the Deputy Shadow Minister, Desiree van der Walt, across the country, which aimed at investigating the state of readiness for schools to reopen. The first school we visited with the portfolio committee in Ekurhuleni, Rhodesfield Technical High School, is a specialization school focused on technical skills and aviation. However, upon arrival, the principal took us to all their workshops, which were flooded with water despite over 2 million spent in repairs on the dilapidated asbestos structures, leaving most workshops unusable and equipment damaged. This reinforces the importance and the need for consequence management and Treasury deregistering implementing agents and companies who look to exploit maintenance challenges in schools at the expense of taxpayers' money. Furthermore, there is little to no support for technical maths and science, which are core subjects for their specialization in aviation. There's a need to strengthen the curriculum review to focus on specialization or collaborative schools, which are essential in developing skills needed by the economy. The Department of Basic Education in Gauteng further cited safety and security in schools as a massive challenge. Cases ranged from vandalism to arson and mainly directed at admin blocks, nutrition, ICT infrastructure, and storage facilities. 355 schools has been vandalized, and 131 of these schools have been repeat incidences like we've seen recently during the unrest, costing the department 38 million. KZN painted a grim picture for conducive learning environment, where we visited the Ekurhuleni in Ixopo district, which hosted the most mud schools in the province. Impunga Full Service School and Mhlabe are schools that are roofless as we speak, with no money left for repairs. Furthermore, there was no plan to rebuild these mud schools, let alone maintain the already existing infrastructure. What was more concerning, though, was that there are over 120,000 learners eligible for scholar transport that are left behind to walk long kilometers to school in risk of being mugged or raped, like we saw at Umzimkhulu Full Service School. Additionally, there are over 3,000 schools with no access to water and have pit toilets. KZN was also not spared from vandalism and theft, with over 465 schools vandalized due to poor security. In the Eastern Cape, I personally took the portfolio committee in the department through my constituency of Alfred Zor with many dilapidated mud and asbestos schools. I've visited and I've helped over the past couple of months. Specifically, E.T. Tabane, which is the only non-fee paying school in Ugi, with over 2,000 learners dependent on their service. This school was budgeted for and went on tender through their CD program and was later removed by DBE, despite it being closed down by the Department of Environmental Affairs because it's unsafe for learners. Despite the department saying temporary measures will be put in place 7 months ago, it still stands looking the same as I've been there last week. It is schools like that that suffer when the department's budget is being cut to save failed SOEs. More embarrassingly, the department promised to call back an implementing agent that built new toilets which were not working at Mount Fletcher Special School within 3 months when we were there to visit. However, till to date, the learners with special needs still release themselves in pit toilets or in the bush. The Eastern Cape has the most pit toilets in schools across all provinces, and only half have been prioritized, despite President Ramaphosa lying to us about eradicating pit toilets by March 2020 in schools. Generally, all schools complained about high dropouts, curriculum relevance and recovery, infrastructure, safety and security.
I want to recognize the honourable member on the floor who has a point of order.
Thank you, Chairperson. The member who's on the visual platform has said that the president is lying. According to Rule 84, it falls under unparliamentary language.
Yes, you see, honourable members, this word lie is loosely used in this house, and it's actually very serious what you're saying, because it casts aspersions on the integrity of the member that you direct it to. So I will request you, honourable member, to withdraw that remark, and I will also caution other members who frequently use that word to be very careful by doing so. You should actually bring a substantive motion against the member. You must withdraw the remark, honourable member.
Remark is withdrawn, Chair. Despite President Ramaphosa indicating that pit toilets will be eradicated by March 2020, and still there are many of them till date. Generally, all schools complained about high dropouts, curriculum relevance and recovery, infrastructure, safety and security. As a DA, we wrote a full report and a request for intervention to Minister Mochega and DBE following these visits across the country, not just the ones from the portfolio committee. We recommended the following even in the portfolio committee. Holding implementing agents and contractors accountable for poor quality work is important. Those that are unreliable must be taken off the system so that they cannot continue and do the work of building poor quality structures or not completing their work. DBE must engage National Treasury on their CD program or other sources of funding to ensure dilapidated money goes to schools.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The EFF.
Chairperson, this report deals with the oversight visits we undertook in January and February this year, and we're focused on school readiness in light of this impact of the COVID pandemic. The processing of reports like this are a serious concern because we are now almost at the tail end of the year, and the adoption of these reports by Parliament becomes a mere box-ticking exercise. Parliament must find better means of processing these reports faster in order to allow Parliament to be in a better position to address some of these issues. As for the oversight visits, it's a serious concern to us that the Department of Education seems to have no capacity at all to learn from the past mistakes, and there's no commitment to continuous improvements. We have known for a while, even before COVID, that rural and township schools are ill-equipped and do not provide a conducive environment for learning. In rural parts of KZN and the Eastern Cape, learners still struggle with transport to and from schools. Classrooms are inadequate to cater for the social distancing required to lower rates on infections. There are no gadgets to facilitate online learning. Compared to schools that cater for predominantly white children, it's difficult to reconcile that our education system is as fragmented by class and race as it is today. Poor Black children are condemned to substandard facilities and have had their education severely compromised during this pandemic, while their white counterparts have had the benefits of online education with all the support they need to advance their education. More disdainfully, the Department of Education saw the COVID pandemic as an opportunity to loot public resources instead of building up the capacity of schools to provide quality education. In Gauteng under Panyasa Lesufi, they spent almost $500 million sanitizing empty schools, an extravagant waste of public funds. In KZN, they ransacked and damaged schools in order to get tenders to refurbish the very same schools. The department is rotten to the core and has no care at all for the education of our children. Therefore, we reject this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The IFP.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. The oversight visit to Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape Departments of Education provided the Portfolio Committee on Education with key insights into the practical challenges faced by schools in these provinces, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Despite the immense challenges brought about by the pandemic, it is critical that access to education is not further compromised and that we ensure that access to quality education remains our country's top priority. The future of South Africa rests on the decisions we make now and the actions we take to ensure that the most vulnerable youth in our society are not left behind. After consideration of the report, the IFP in general supports the committee's recommendation that in all three provinces, the aspect of infrastructure of schools should be a top priority. In particular, schools that have been identified as storm damaged, dangerous, and hazardous should receive urgent attention. One of the greatest strategies we face is that despite the constitutional mandate resting on the state to ensure that each child has access to education, the safety of schools, which form an integral part of that right, has been seriously neglected by the state. We have had countless litigation in this aspect, as well as horrifying reports of deaths caused due to unsafe pit latrines. We cannot allow any excuses, and as Parliament, we need to closely monitor the department's performance and demand accountability. On the visit to Impunga Full Service School in Ixopo, KwaZulu-Natal, the dire shortage of ablution facilities was very concerning. It was reported that only 8 pit toilets were available for 600 learners. This appalling situation cannot be accepted. The school also faced serious challenges regarding water, and it was reported that the school has no running water, which is clear contradiction of the COVID-19 protocols. Although we have been told that the department was in the process of erecting new toilets and that the school was earmarked for a borehole, this slow progress is simply unacceptable. The IFP further agrees with the committee's recommendation that safety and security should be a key priority for these 3 provincial departments. There should be collaboration with the security cluster to ensure that the schools are linked to their nearest police stations. In conclusion, the IFP will closely monitor the performance of these 3 provincial education departments, especially in relation to ensuring safe and secure schools. The IFP accepts the report, September.
Thank you, Honourable Member. EFF Plus.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The Oversight visit to schools to establish the state of readiness for a year which has since nearly been completed, focused the attention on the amplification of established problems by the COVID pandemic. Nou, as ons kyk na die vandalisering van skole, dan is dit die duidelike gevolg van gemeenskappe wat eenvoudig...
Oh, no, it was
Ek is nie seker waarmee eerbare de Vrytas besig is nie, maar kan ek voortgaan, afbare voorzitter?
Honourable Member, may I just request honourable members who are on the platform to actually follow proceedings? Because if you do that, then you won't accidentally switch on your microphone or your platform or your camera on. So please, let's just observe that. Otherwise, you're going to have to frequent disturbances. Continue, honourable members.
Dankie, afbare voorzitter. Die vandalisering van skole is 'n duidelike teken van gemeenskappe wat eenvoudig nie eienaarskap neem oor hulle skole nie. Een van die groot vrae wat die hele onderwysopset van Suid-Afrika deurtrek is die vraag waarom nie? Wat is dit wat dit veroorsaak? Nou natuurlik is daar te min geld en ek moet sê die komitee vir basiese onderwys is een van verskeie instellings in Suid-Afrika wat dink hulle kan 'n werklikheid skep deur 'n woord te spreek. Ongelukkig is dit 'n vermoë wat mense nie het nie, om iets in aansyn te roep deur die woord te sê. Om te sê, daar moet meer geld bestee word op infrastruktuurontwikkeling. Dit kan enigiemand sien, wanneer hy 'n skool sien waarvan die dak ingeval is, of wat in 'n swak toestand is. Maar waar moet daardie geld vandaan kom, veral indien die skole dan nie opgepas word deur die gemeenskappe waar dit gebou is nie. Dieselfde geld vir die voorsiening van vervoer, aangesien die staat beleid volg om kleiner skole toe te maak en mense van al hoe verder af na groter sentrale skole toe te vervoer. Nou waarmee ons dit doen het is eintlik maar die doodgewone gevolg van 'n fiskale mislukking in Suid-Afrika. In die eerste plek word geld wat die staatskas behoort te gebruik om instellings soos skole se infrastruktuur op te bou, gebruik om instellings wat finansiële bronne behoort te wees, liewers te subsidieer in hulle verliese. Dit beteken dat daar eenvoudig nie geld is om die soort van goed te doen wat die staat moet doen, omdat niemand anders dit kan bekostig nie. Verder het ons 'n algemene beleid wat die ekonomiese groei teenwerk, want daar word volhard met beleidsraamwerke wat nie meriete bevoordeel nie, maar wel identiteit. Dit skep 'n onkompeterende bevolking, 'n onkompeterende ekonomie. Nie as gevolg van enige inherente gebreke by mense om hard te werk of om slim te werk of om deeglik te werk nie, maar omdat daar 'n aanhoudende aanmoediging is om nie aan te dring op die beste werk nie, maar om te sê wat ek nie het nie, is ek opgeregtig op grond van watter faktore ook al. Dit bring ons dan nou terug na die bevindinge wat die oorsigbesoek mee vorendag gekom het. Dit is almal baie goeie aanbevelings en die Vryheidsfront kan hom daarmee vereenselwig. Die vraag is, kan dit gedoen word? Kan dit uitgevoer word? En ek is bevrees, die antwoord is waarskynlik nee, omdat die staatskas doodgewoon leeg is en omdat daar maatskaplike pensioene is wat uitbetaal moet word en falende staatsondernemings wat gered moet word. Daarom kan skoolinfrastruktuur ongelukkig nie die geld kry wat dit verdien nie. Baie dankie, agbare voorsitter.
Thank you, honourable member. The ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. The ACDP supports this report, and I think that there are a number of very positive recommendations that are contained in the report. But again, as previous speakers have indicated, the budgetary constraints in implementing these recommendations are there, and we all are aware of that. And that is the challenge in implementing the good recommendations of the Portfolio Committee. That having been said, I would, on behalf of the ACDP, like to just reject any assertion that the Honourable Maurice Soekers...
Member, the Honourable Tseki. Honourable members, please follow the proceedings, and those on the virtual platform, don't disrupt the House. Continue, Honourable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. Given the fact that I raised a point of order too late in the previous item, I would like to reject any assertion that the Honourable Soekers, who serves on this Portfolio Committee diligently, in any way misled Parliament, or, as we all know, we are all sinners. So, Chair, having said that, the ACDP will support this report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The UDM, ATM, Good, AIC, COPE, PAC, Al-Jama, the ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson, and honorable members, good afternoon. The coronavirus pandemic has led to the disruption of teaching and learning as we know it. The Department of Basic Education had to adapt and undertake to comply with all health protocols and standards in the Disaster Management Act. This showed the level of basic services backlog in some schools, particularly in rural areas. As an oversight body, it is critical for us as the Portfolio Committee to hold oversight visits to engage with different stakeholders in the basic education sector. The Portfolio Committee has conducted visits in Gauteng, Ekurhuleni North District, KwaZulu-Natal in Umzimkhulu and Ixopo Education District, as well as Eastern Cape in Matatiele and Mount Fletcher Education District. This is important to understand the lived experience of learners, teachers, staff, school governing bodies, and to respond to the challenges affecting our schools. The coronavirus pandemic is a life-threatening disease, and if our schools are not compliant with the health protocols, they run the risk of being super spreaders. As the African National Congress, we support this report because it reflects the success of the oversight visit. The reopening of schools in 2021 was delayed due to the virus spark. In our visit to Ziba Full Service Primary in Tembisa, the schools face various challenges which affect many schools in rural and townships. which is lack of infrastructure due to a growing population in the surrounding communities, lack of sporting facilities and minimum parental involvement. The role of parents or guardians in the education of their children is so important and cannot be undermined. Parental involvement is important because it enables the parents to support the learner as well as creating a conducive environment for the learner at home. Whilst Rhodsfield Technical High School in Ekurhuleni North in Captain Park had the opposite effect with partnerships with the aviation industry. The school has sufficient and reliable water and sanitation. The school complied with all the school readiness health protocols and was also planning for a full connectivity. Despite this, the school has a governing body which does not fully comprehend their role. We support the recommendation by the Portfolio Committee to ensure that the school demographics are representative of their community, as it is a free-paying school which creates exclusion of mainly the poor. These two opposites depict the structural socio-economic inequalities which confronts our country. Our provincial departments, through their appropriation, should prioritize closing the inequality gap through the development of facilities for learning and teaching. Access to sports facilities also contribute to the holistic growth of the learner. It is important that we develop sporting facilities for all our schools, as it is good for the well-being of the student. Ixopo High School, situated in Miscofield Circuit in KwaZulu-Natal, raised challenges of use of drugs and smoking, bullying and theft of devices, among others. These are social challenges which require multiple interventions at a family level, community level, and broadly in society. Water and sanitation are a prevalent challenge in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. The oversight visit has also enabled monitoring of various areas of concern, which as the ANC we have been gravely concerned with. Our concern is largely on the lack of basic services across the country, and vandalism is one of the concerns. Despite the numerous speculation from those in the opposition benches, like the EFF on closure of schools. Contrary to that has been the progress attained by the department in using the limited resources in containing the spread of the coronavirus and continuing with teaching and learning. Provincial departments have ensured schools have the critical basic services such as water and sanitation, furniture and adequate teacher support material, personal protective equipment essentials, amongst others. The Educator Employment Initiative as well has resulted in making a difference in supporting the school reopening process. This has also benefited 300,000 young people who have gained skills and workplace exposure, which is important for their development. This initiative requires consideration for the short term, for the medium term at a sustainable basis for the youth. Chairperson, the ANC do not make promises, but commitments. And when the ANC-led government says it will eradicate mud schools, this will indeed happen. The ANC supports this report and will monitor the different recommendations made by the Portfolio Committee. The oversight visit helped the Portfolio Committee to focus on critical issues affecting our schools in urban and rural areas. It will aid the recommendation of appropriate budgeting priorities as part of the budgeting cycle of government. In conclusion, it is unthinkable for the member of the EFF to come and say that the department has spent millions sanitizing an empty school. Remember, a school is not just buildings. There are people involved. So I believe if that happened, there were people in that school. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I now recognize the Honourable Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. I move that the report be adopted.
The motion is that the report be adopted. Are there any objections?
Yes, consider the EFF objections, Chair.
Thank you. The EFF's objection is noted. With that objection, the report is agreed to. We now come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a motion without notice? The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress move without notice that the House notes that the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games, a major international multi-sport, parasport event took place in Tokyo, Japan, between 24th August and 5th September 2021. Further notes that Team South Africa did the country proud by being awarded 7 medals, 4 gold, 2 bronze, and 1 silver. Acknowledges that Tando Maslangu won 2 gold medals and set a new record of 7.17 meter in the long jump. Enru Meyers won gold in the 200-meter race. Nicolas de Prier won gold in cycling. Lausanne Kutsia won silver in the 1,500-meter race. And Cheryl James won bronze in the 400-meter race. And congratulates all the athletes who have participated in the Paralympics for flying the flag of the South Africa high and wishes them well in their future endeavors. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Ms. Nompumelelo Memela sadly passed away at the age of 23 years in a fire that engulfed the shack she was in the Mkhashi section in Standerton on the 24th of May 2021. Further notes that Ms. Memela's boyfriend of more than 3 years, who managed to escape the fire with some burn wounds, was arrested in connection with her death after suspecting that he could have started the fire. Recalls that the relationship between Ms. Memela and her boyfriend was often marked with fighting. Emphasizes that the fight against the scourge of gender-based violence is a fight that needs all of us to stand together 365 days a year. Acknowledges that Ms. Memela has been described as a bubbly, humble, and cheerful young woman who will be dearly missed by her family and friends. Conveys its heartfelt condolences to Ms. Memela's family and friends. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The EFF.
Thank you, Chairperson. I rise on behalf of the EFF that the House notes with sadness the death of the 3 educators from Umso High School in Colesberg in the Northern Cape Province, who were killed as a result of a car accident this past Saturday. Further notes that a 4th teacher who was with them in the car is critically injured and is in hospital fighting for his life, and that the school and the whole basic education fraternity is in deep mourning. Acknowledges further that the death of any teacher is one death too many in a country which is in desperate need of good teachers, and that the death of 3 teachers from the same school is a monumental disaster that will affect not only their families, but the pupils at the schools too. Further acknowledge that pupils, staff, families, and communities are devastated by the untimely occurrence, since the collective contribution of these teachers to learning has been ripped away from their pupils and the province. Sends its condolences to the families of the departed teachers, as well as to Umso High School. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move that the House notes with sadness the passing on of the founding member of the international acclaimed Mpaqanga Group, Mahotela Queens, Mama Nobesuthu Mpatu, on Monday, 31st August 2021. Acknowledges that the 76-year-old legendary musician was part of a generation that put South African music on the world stage with unique melodies and signature dance moves. Understands that her health started deteriorating in 2017 and she retired from performing. Recalls that her career started when she was 19-year-old teenager, joining Mahotela Queens and alongside fellow group members Hilda Tlubatla, Mildred Mangola, Juliet Mazamamisa, and Ethel Mgomezulu. Further recalls that the 5 queens were then paired with a Mpaqanga instrumental team, the Mahona Tsohle Band, and then vocals of the late Simon Matatiele Kabinde. Remembers that she leaves behind a full legacy of songs like Gazette, Mbube, Africa, and Melodiala that have solidified their roles in the Mpaqanga genre and conveys condolences to her family, colleagues, and the music fraternity. I so move, Chair. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The IFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I move that the House notes all the efforts of the Gift of the Givers organization, founded by Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, who sprang into action in the wake of the devastating unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng a few months ago, acknowledges that the well-known humanitarian organization, in addition to supporting residents in the affected communities, also provided much-needed support to medical personnel who were hit with food shortages while under intense pressure at hospitals. Further acknowledges that in light of the recent observation of World Humanitarian Day, marked a few weeks ago on Thursday, 19th August, it is important to acknowledge that the achievements of ordinary South Africans and the role of community and civil society organizations and their contribution to keeping society functional. Encourages South Africans who are able to do their part to make a difference and address the challenging societal conditions exposed by the lockdown and the recent unrest, and calls on the government to provide the requisite assistance and to prioritize the rebuilding of these destabilized areas of the country in order to restore the economy. I so move. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, I hereby move on behalf of the FF Plus that the House acknowledges the launch of the first ever dictionary of South Africa's Kaap language. Further acknowledges that the Kaap's language, commonly used by working class speakers on the Cape Flats, has been in existence since the 1500s, but has never had a dictionary until now, and applauds the efforts by all parties involved in this very important project, as well as the contribution it makes to the cultural and language landscape of our country. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The gigantic African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes that 4 postgraduate students from the University of Pretoria's Department of Biochemistry, Genetics and Microbiology are about to set sail for the South Atlantic. Further notes that the all-female team of scientists will spend 36 days aboard the RVSA Agaras 2 to be operated by the National Environmental Affairs Department. Acknowledges that as part of a program supported by the National Research Foundation and the SA National Antarctic Program, the students will collect samples and conduct experiments in the ocean. Understand that the team of Mancha Mabaso, Caitlin Fourie, Shade Makhabota, and Francina Ratsoma will focus their research on marine environment that are geographically strategic to Mzansi. Believes that the findings of this study will have greater implications for understanding climate change in the global economy, and wishes the team well in their first trip to the South Atlantic. Danko.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ACDP.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the ACDP, I move without notice that the House notes with sadness the passing of Mr. John Gerald Apollos, a remarkable and beloved teacher. Further notes that Mr. Apollos, as he was affectionately known, was a teacher for over 40 years, with 36 years as a teacher at Macassar High School. Recalls that Mr. Apollos started his career at Lukhof High School and remembers him for the impact he made on the lives of learners and the wider community, and extend its deepest condolences to the Apollos family and those close to Mr. John Apollos. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The UDM, ATM, the DA.
Thank you, Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House knows that Mrs. Soli Malatsi and Makashule Ghana launched their home run initiative at the start of Youth Month, where they announced that they will be running the 500 kilometers run between Soweto and Zanen to raise money to assist learners to stay in school. Further notes that Mrs. Malatsi and Ghana, who have a deep understanding of plight of many impoverished communities in the rural villages in Limpopo where they grew up, tapped their abilities as avid runners to raise funds for uniforms and sanitary pads to help the disadvantaged learners to stay in school. Acknowledges that many girls miss valuable school days during their menstrual cycles because they cannot afford to buy sanitary pads, and that Mrs. Malatsi and Ghana believes that it is important that these obstacles are addressed by society. Recalls that Mrs. Malatsi and Ghana hoped that they will inspire learners to take their education seriously and be able to escape a life of poverty through their initiatives. Recognizes that Mrs. Malatsi and Ghana raised over 350,000 and many other donations in kind, including sanitary pads and school shoes through this initiative. Congratulate Mrs. Malatsi and Ghana on their great achievements and wishes them well in their future charitable endeavors. I so move, Chair. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The EFF, Messias.
Thanks, House Chair. I rise on behalf of the EFF to move without notice that the House notes the rapid deterioration of the quality of services offered by the Department of Home Affairs across the country. Further notes that the long queues in many of the Home Affairs offices mean that people who need services from that department must take a whole day leave in order to have any hope of being served, and that even those who have been processed have to wait for months before getting their documentations. Further acknowledged that specifically the people of Carolina at the Chief Albert Lutuli municipality have been subjected to long queues at the Department of Home Affairs offices, and that since Friday, the 3 September until to date, they are getting no services from the Department of Home Affairs due to offline systems. Further acknowledged that if things do not change, Home Affairs incompetency will be the biggest threat to the fairness of the upcoming local government election, as many people will not have their ID documentation to enable them to vote. I further instruct the Portfolio Committee of Home Affairs to closely monitor the Department of Home Affairs in order to fast-track the resolution of these problems. I so move, Chair. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
That's your objection.
The motion is not agreed to. The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the passing of a Walter Sisulu University student, who has been stabbed to death allegedly by a fellow student he accused of using multi at the university's East London residence on Monday, the 30th of August, 2021. Further notes that the incident happened at the St. Patrick Court student residence, which housed 89 male students in Southern Hood. Acknowledges that the murdered student, who was 24 years and came from Duncan Village outside the East London, was a final year human resource management student at the university's Buffalo City campus. Further acknowledges that his alleged attacker is a final year mechanical engineering student from Cambridge, which also is in the Eastern Cape. As African National Congress, we condone this unfortunate act of violence and call upon students to be more tolerant of each other's culture and beliefs. Call on the law to take its course for justice to prevail. The African National Congress conveys its condolences to the family of the deceased and the Walter Sisulu University students and academic fraternity. I so move, Chair.
Thank you. If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. Good. NFP, ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with shock and sadness the passing on of Moyikwa Sisulu on the 28th of August, who was the grandson of the African struggle stalwart Tata Walter and Mama Albertina Sisulu. Further notes that the 41-year-old Moyikwa was diagnosed with COVID-19 earlier in August. Recalls that Sisulu was known for being an astute business person with interest in mining, media, property, and other commercial endeavors. Remembers him as a loyal and disciplined patriot with generosity and integrity. Believe that his passing on has robbed South African, one of the finest sons who was dedicated to economic transformation, reconstruction, and development of our country. Conveys condolences to his family, friends, and business associates. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The AIC, COPE, the ANC.
Afternoon. The African National Congress moves that the House knows that the United Nations International Literacy Day annually falls on September the 8th to raise people's awareness of and concern for literacy issues in the world. Further notes that according to UNESCO, about 774 million adults lack minimum literacy skills. 1 in 5 adults is still not literate. 2/3 of them are women, and about 75 million children are out of school, and many more attend irregularly or drop out. Acknowledges that the International Literacy Day in 2021 will be celebrated under the theme code Literacy for Human-Centered Recovery, Narrowing the Digital Divide, close quote. Further acknowledges that the COVID-19 crisis has disrupted the learning of children, young people, and adults at an unprecedented scale, and has also magnified the pre-existing inequalities in access to meaningful literacy learning opportunities. Understands that the International Literacy Day 2021 will explore how literacy can contribute to building a solid foundation for a human-centered recovery, with a special focus on the interplay of literacy, digital skills required by non-literate youth and adults, and calls on everyone to promote the day and raise people's awareness of and concern for literacy problems within our communities. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA.
House Chairperson, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Caleb Barlow is the Eastern Cape's youth first black belt champion in karate at the young age of 13 years old. Further notes that Caleb is a senpai, a master of art of karate, which qualifies him to be a mentor and instructor of karate. Recognizes that Caleb, who started training as a karateka at the age of 6 years old after being inspired by watching karate movies, have started to instruct both young and old in his community of Buffalo Flats in East London. Acknowledge that the role Caleb's instructor, Cheyenne Stephen Martins, played in assisting him to achieve his first then at this young age through his dedication and discipline. Further acknowledge the unwavering support of Caleb's parents and his family, who often raises money for him to travel to the karate events. Understands that Caleb is committed to achieve his second den by the time he turns 16 years old. Congratulate Caleb Barlow on his achievements and wishes him all the best in reaching his goal of achieving a second den. I so move, Chairperson.
If no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The PAC, Al-Jama, the ANC.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Hanif Hendricks, on behalf of Al-Jama, moves without notice that the House notes the sudden sad passing of Mr. Rudy Jansen, the South African internet pioneer who died on Friday, the 3rd of September 2021. Further notes that you will be best remembered in the internet industry as the man who championed affordable and uncapped ADSL broadband in South Africa. Recalls that Jansen was told that uncapped ADSL was not sustainable. Further recalls he proved them wrong and changed the South African broadband landscape forever. Acknowledges that uncapped broadband is now more widespread and more popular than ever, and it has helped ignite many online industries in the country, including online gaming, streaming, and e-commerce. Further acknowledges his achievements were recognized with the Broadband Maverick of the Year Award in 2010 and the My Broadband Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012. Understand that he was awarded a Pioneer of the Internet in 2002 and believes that the progress that Africa has made in this field is largely due to him creating next generation jobs and new revenue streams, and extends its condolences to the family. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
Thank you, House Speaker. The ANC knows that Mr. Patrick O'Reilly has entered the SADC Media Awards and won second prize in the photo category of the regional competition on Tuesday, 17th August 2021. Further notes that the award was announced by the outgoing chairperson of SADC, His Excellency Philip Jacinto Nyusi, President of the Republic of Mozambique, during the opening ceremony of the 41st SADC Summit of the Heads of State Government taking place in the Republic of Malawi. Acknowledges that the SADC Media Awards aimed at promoting excellence in fields of print, radio, television, and photojournalism. Further acknowledges that they also serve as a link of coordination and synchronization between formal structures of SADC member states and media. Recalls that Mr. Patrick O'Reilly is a seasoned journalist specializing in motor journalism who has traveled across the region to cover stories affecting the trucking industry, and congratulates Mr. Patrick O'Reilly on his achievements and for raising the country flags. I so move. Thank you.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. That concludes motions without notice. The last item on the order paper is notices of motion. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a notice of motion? The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I move on behalf of ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the prevalence of workplace bullying in South Africa and whether there are differences in employees' experiences of bullying with regard to socio-demographic characteristics and diversity experiences. I thank you.
The DA.
Thank you, Chair.
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the need to devolve certain constitutional powers and functions to provinces and municipalities which are more capable of better fulfilling these powers and functions. I so move.
The EFF.
Thank you, Speaker. I hereby move that in the next discussion in Parliament, we move that we discuss how industrial parks and trade parks can move closer to the youth in rural areas, such that all information pertaining to job pertaining can be moved closer to them so that they may know what is happening. I so move.
The ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates finalization and implementation of a social compact which steers the country towards active citizenry and ethical leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP. The IFP.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the Inkatha Freedom Party, I hereby give note that I shall move at the next sitting of this House, that this House debates the rising levels of violence in schools and the urgent need to mobilize all stakeholders to combat the alarming trend. I so move.
The FF Plus.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I hereby give notice on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus that the House at its next session debates the true value and necessity of the EPWP program in the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and whether or not it actually contributes to sustainable employment creation in South Africa. I so move.
The ANC.
Honorable Chairperson, I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates strengthening and deepening South Africa's economic diplomacy capabilities to ensure closer alignment between the diplomatic mission structures and the objectives of economic diplomacy, including in personnel and representation. I thank you.
Thank you. The ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, I have a connection problem, so I'm leaving my camera off with your permission. I will move on behalf of the ACDP at the next sitting of the House that the House debates the challenges facing the mining sector in the country, particularly regarding rife criminality, murder and mayhem, with mining companies having to ward off procurement, mafia, illegal miners and crime syndicates that seriously threaten the viability of this sector.
The UDM, ATM, DA. The Democratic Alliance.
House Chair, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the state of the Republic's heritage sites. I thank you. I so move.
Thank you. The EFF.
Thanks, House Chairperson. I move on behalf of the economic freedom fighters that in the next House sitting, that the House must debate the following: the forever downtime computer systems at the Department of Home Affairs offices and the security of the department and the backlog of the identity documents. I so move.
The ANC.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the development, impact of performance monitoring and evaluation of government services, programs and projects. I so move.
Good. NFP, ANC.
House Chairperson, thank you very much. I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the implementation and monitoring of South Africa's national climate change obligations. I so move. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The AIC, go. The ANC.
Honorable Chair, I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates measures to protect key state witnesses or whistleblowers who may be in possession of sensitive information. Thank you.
The Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, House Chair. I won't put my camera on. My network is unstable. House Chair, I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the crucial role that tourism sector can play in contributing to the much needed economic growth and job creation initiatives in the Republic's post-COVID-19 pandemic economic recovery efforts. I so move.
The PAC. Al-Jama. The ANC.
Thanks, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the ANC that in the next sitting, the House debates strengthening the placement of graduates in workplaces so that they are work ready for easy absorption in the world. I so move.
Thank you. Honourable members, that concludes notices of motion and the business for the day. The House is adjourned.
Long live the chair!
Recording stopped.